Matt.
Hi, Jason. Nice to come in. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Well, what a great afternoon of curling we've got. Continuing coverage of the curling stadium, Martensville International. This is draw number 8, feature game. You're watching it right here. Mike McEwen against John Epping. Intra-provincial battle in Ontario. We've now joining forces with an Ontario foursome.
Yeah, I think this will be a fantastic matchup. Of course, these guys have played together a number of times through, or played against each other, I should say, a number of times throughout the year. Also, maybe a little bit of a revenge game. Brent Lang and Ryan Fry both playing with John Epping last season, so I'm sure they're looking forward to hopefully notching a win up on the board today.
Yeah, for sure. The entire team Epping from last season on the ice right now. What do you think about this match? How do you think, is it going to be aggressive?
Well, you never really know, especially this early in the season. These are certainly two of the more aggressive men's players in the past, I think. Mike maybe a little bit less. I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see them be a little bit more cautious, especially both sides are playing with new teams, still getting used to each other. But with a couple games under their belts already, and from what I've seen so far this weekend, they've looked fairly confident. So I wouldn't be surprised to see quite a few rocks in play once we get comfortable with the ice here.
A bit of a scary situation right now for Team Epping with 3 McEwen Stones hanging in the back, Matt.
Yeah, especially with the hammer, John's gonna have to do something with these. Although they are all at the back of the rings and fairly well grouped, so there shouldn't be too hard to at least make a double here and limit the damage. And if you make a really good shot on John's first rock here, maybe get out of it with a blank. But we'll see what he can do. It looks like he's trying to just cross the face, maybe roll behind that red guard. If you can get that second blue rock moving out of the rings, that's just a bonus for him. But I think it's really important to put this red stone in a good spot. So roll it behind the guard, make it really tough for Mike to get at. So I don't think that quite curled up maybe as much as John would have liked to, but still in a pretty good spot. To get that red rock out cleanly, Mike's going to be rolling away to the wing, so certainly possible you could see a rollout, which would leave sort of a savior double here for John in the first end. But with a if they are very confident with the ice, he might be able to bring the weight down and stick around for three, which would obviously be a great start to the game for Mike. So first rock coming up here for Mike, trying a nice delicate weight hit to remove this red stone and try and sit three. Maybe a little heavy. They got John Buke on it to try and make it curl. Not the result he was looking for there. It looks like he jammed it and red is still shot stone, so that's going to be a huge break, I think, for John Epping. Maybe a sigh of relief in the first end. Going to get the opportunity to now sink one around this guard, sit two, and really cut down the rings for Mike. I think, at this level, this isn't necessarily that John's thinking about a steal, but if he can put a rock in a really good spot in the side of the forefoot behind that guard, it just cuts down the scoring area for Mike, and he just wants to make it as tough as possible on him. And you never know this early in the season. These shots aren't, these draws to the button aren't as much of a gimme as you might see later on in the year. So it's coming down. The sweepers seem to like it. Line looks good. Looks like it will finish him behind the guard, but maybe just a little bit heavy. So a bit of a missed opportunity there for John, and it will give Mike a little bit more backing to work with, but you still have to be pretty careful down this path. It's easy to think that you have that backing in the back of your mind, and you throw it a little bit heavier and it can sail by, especially on ice like this. So it'd be good to see if they've figured out this path to the button, but I would expect Mike to be very close on this. Final rock here from Mike in the first end, looking for the outturn draw to get a piece of the button for one, but sweepers do not like it early. They are just sort of watching this. Cam ready to sweep this back, and just slipped to the back of the rings, and looks like it's going to be a steal of 2 for John Epping to start this game. So an end where maybe 3 or 4 shots ago, John was sweating a little bit, really had the pressure against him, but 2 pretty tough miscues by Mike McEwen, shots that you don't normally see missed that poorly. Results in a steal of 2 for John Epping and a great start to this game. So that's huge, especially with 2 very strong teams like this. You really want to get on the, if you can get on the board early, really put the pressure on the other team. That's great.
Imagine a place with endless possibilities. Imagine a place where people come together to build families, businesses, and communities. Imagine a place where small-town values and progressive qualities are in perfect harmony. Imagine a place rich with so much vitality. Imagine your future in Martensville.
Well, we're back for the second end here in Martensville Curling Stadium, Martensville International. If you're just joining us, my name is Jason Chang. With me is 2019 Canadian and World Junior Champion Matt Hall. Matt, first end, interesting first end, as you talked about there. Team Epping getting 2 points on the board, a big steal over Mike McEwen. Mike McEwen retains last rock here in the second. Expect him to put up a corner guard here?
Absolutely. I kind of mentioned in the first end that I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see these 2 teams get their feet underneath them a little bit. But with 2 teams of this caliber that are so strong, you really sort of have to push the envelope when you get behind early like this. You can't sort of just sit back and wait for the other team to make mistakes, because, well, I mean, they're not going to make too many if you don't force them to. So gonna see them try and get a corner guard up here, although looks like this might just slip into the rings, which is not what you're looking
Just
for.
slips in. Team Epping can make a hit now on that stone.
Absolutely, and so it'll be interesting to see how Mike sort of bounces back from this. Obviously, that was an end where I think after maybe the Vice's rocks, you have everything you could have ever asked for. You have a great setup, sitting 3 in the back of the rings, really sort of a no pressure situation, and somehow just a big miss by Mike's first rock and just sailing through on his draw sort of turned that whole end around. That's not something you see a lot from teams of this caliber. So we'll watch to see how quickly it takes Team McEwen to bounce back. I wouldn't expect it to take that long, but I'd like to see if John's really going to try and put the pedal down early here, especially seeing two big miscues like that from Mike. He might not be feeling too confident, so John might sort of sense blood in the water and really try and take it to him.
Now, we know in the past, 4-rock free guard zone rule, the team scoring 2 in the first end has a big advantage in terms of win percentage. Do you know if that's changed a lot with the 5-rock free guard zone? Has that advantage increased, decreased, or hasn't changed too much?
It's definitely not as big as it maybe used to be when it was the 4-rock rule, but I mean, curling's curling, and I think the teams have really adapted well to the 5-rock rule, especially in terms of defense. I think when it was first brought in, those first season or two, you saw a lot of comeback wins, but I think teams have really learned how to properly defend against the 5-rock rule and keep those comebacks from happening. So I believe giving up 2 in the first end, I think your win percentage is somewhere around 20%. It might have been around 30 when the 5-rock rule first came into effect, but teams have really been able to adjust quite well to it. So still a very big swing of things towards the Epping side.
Well, thanks for that great insight. I remember watching the 5-rock rule when it first came out, and those 3s and 4s just popped up on the scoreboard when a team had hammer, and even in that last end when a team was down by 2, that comeback, getting 3 in that last end was not uncommon. It came up certainly more often than the 4-rock rule.
Yeah, and I think part of that is when you were in the 4-rock rule, you could play very defensively in that kind of situation. You could just peel guards, sort of just run out the clock on the other team, but that's not really a possibility anymore with the 5-rock rule. And I think it took a little bit of time for teams to figure out that you do still have to play aggressively. You still have to play the game of curling, make good shots in that last end, and you can still come away with wins just as often, but you need to play a bit more aggressively and really go for it. And I think that's a great thing for the sport. I think it makes it a lot more fun to watch, but definitely teams have been able to learn from it.
Well, team Epping sensing that corner guard situation is a bit of a problem, trying to make a play on that.
And just not able to. Looks like a bit of a double jam. Left that blue stone there. That was a great sort of freeze opportunity by John Buke. Didn't quite get it right on the rock, but left it in a great spot just above it. So now, as you can see, there's always going to be the opportunity to maybe run that blue guard. Very short run back into the other blue to remove the red. So Mike's not going to worry about that situation over there. That's probably going to be there for a long time. So looks like he's going to try, you can see the call, maybe a hit and roll in off the center rock, get another blue stone behind that guard, and really open up the opportunity to score a few points.
So trying to hit and roll to the left-hand side behind that pile of stones here, make use of those corner guards. Nice thing for Team McEwen here is they've got the center open. You've always got an out-turn draw if you're a righty, that counter-clockwise draw if you need to take one. Now, Matt, that rock maybe rolled a bit too far because it kind of screwed up the angle for that blue-blue combination, didn't it?
Yeah, I was just about to say, a little bit unfortunate, maybe making the shot too good. Just sort of, you get that little bit of gear action. It spun up off that red stone and rolled to a spot that really sort of gets in the way of that blue-blue run back I was talking about. It is still there, but to keep the guard is much trickier now. So that actually opens up the opportunity for John now to play the shot, since it's, even if, say, they didn't make this perfect and they ran the blue-blue into the red, you're going to at least lose one of the blue stones and probably roll out. But he's probably going to try and get 2 of them moving here.
He gets a couple moving, but stuffs the rock that he runs back. That's Matt Cam, third stone thrower for Team Epping. Matt and John, they've been playing together for a long time. I think Matt was playing second stones in the past quadrennial, moving up to the third stones now with the departure of Ryan Fry on that team.
And that's what the interesting things. I was looking back at the stats for these two teams. I believe they have probably played against each other close to 30, 35 times, Mike and John. But obviously, very different squads over the years, and especially this year, entirely new squads for both skips, with the exception of Matt Cam for John, who's played with him for a long time. So it's interesting to see, especially as the season progresses, how quickly they're able to react to each other. And they've obviously, all of these players have played against each other for a long, long time. They know each other very well. I don't think it'll take that long to really get through the growing pains, but anytime you put a new team together, you got to get used to each other, and it takes a handful of games or maybe a couple events to do just that.
We talked about them playing 30, 35 times over the years, those skips, John Epping and Mike McEwen. I know teams more and more look at their stats and historical stats to plot a game strategy against another team, but when you've got such a major lineup change, how much of those old stats can you rely on going into a new season with a completely new team against an opponent that has a completely new team as well?
I think you can still sort of look back at them, especially because obviously Mike and John have very distinct styles and how they like to call the game, how they like to play the game. And I don't necessarily think that'll change, especially nowadays. So many players are just so well-rounded. They're able to play any shot, make any shot. Um, Obviously, everyone has their tendencies, but I think it's maybe a lot less than it used to be a number of years ago. So I think you can still rely on them, but especially this early in the season, you just have to be a little bit careful. Anything can happen. Any team can sort of beat anybody in the first couple weeks of the year. We've already seen um, some upsets this weekend, and we've seen some big favorites doing what they should do. So really, you can't rely on a whole lot this early in the season. But I think as they get used to each other, I don't think the skips are really going to change all that much their perspective on, say, strategy or how they want to go about the game. It's just going to take some time for the rest of the players to get used to it.
Well, that blue-red combination is back on the left side of the sheet. Team Epping really has to be careful now to make sure they don't let those blue stones score.
Yeah, and maybe a little bit of, maybe call it miscommunication, or that red stone that was just thrown by Matt Cam maybe just went a little bit too far. You can see, if you ever played that blue-red on the side of the rings, if you could ever hit that blue thin enough, if it comes off the red right behind it, it'll sort of slide right into the other red that was just thrown by Matt Cam. So that's always going to be an opportunity for Mike. I think it's not necessarily something he has to play right now, but it's for sure something he has in the back of his mind. Right now, the problem rocks for him that are really keeping him from scoring multiple points are these guards. If he can get these guards out of the way, he has some opportunities with the blue stones in the ring. So he's going to ask Ryan Fry to try and make a double peel here, get some rocks moving, and he'll do that beautifully. Opens up that one side of the sheet, so now Mike has the opportunity to play some short run backs, play some taps, and really try and get his two in line for this end and get back into this game.
Yeah, really nice double peel by Ryan Fry. He's always been a very good hitter. He's played with a lot of top skips over the years, of course, including that gold medal with Brad Jacobs at the Olympic Games. Well, what do you do now with Team Epping? You are sitting shot in second, but those two redstones very vulnerable right now. Can you make the play on the blue, or is it too dangerous?
I thought about it. I think you could definitely hit the blue that's a little bit higher in the rings in the 12-foot into the other one as if you were playing a double. The problem with that is, of course, the blue rock that you're going to be running back isn't really going to go anywhere. You can get rid of the one in the 8-foot, but the one in the 12-foot will probably just jam into the one of the reds and stick there, and you're kind of conceding the deuce in that case. You're probably going to lose a red. Mike will be able to play a hit, sit two somewhere. So it does bring on a little bit of risk if you don't make this shot, but I think what they're looking at is probably just drawing into the rings. Sitting three, it's late enough in the end. Mike will have to make two very good doubles to score multiple if you put this rock in the right spot. But looks like maybe the sweepers don't like it. Might be a little bit heavy, so they're on it now. So it might be okay. But you really got to be careful about where you put this rock. If you put it in a good spot, it can end up working out well for you. But maybe slips a little deep there. So we'll see what Mike decides to go with here. Certainly a bit of a miscue by John. Maybe the opportunity for a short run back double. I don't know if the triple is there. It looks very close though. So Mike might be licking his lips a little bit at this opportunity.
That triple being blue into the two reds and have one of the reds carry them into the other red on the back of the forefoot, right?
Right, and you don't have to make the triple. Obviously, if you can, that would be fantastic. But especially you want to hopefully get two of the red rocks moving, maybe leave two or three blues sitting around the rings and get John really considering about what his options are and play it really safe. And if you can keep two or three blues around the rings, you're really hoping that you can maybe get a bit of a missed shot by John on his last one and get the opportunity for a bundle.
Well, we saw this in the last game. Team Epping played against Yannick Schwaller. It was a tight game through four ends, 2-2, and then Yannick Schwaller blew open a 7 in the fifth end, and that's because Schwaller was able to leave three or four of his stones around the 12-foot. John Epping had a lonely rock, tried to always get two in the rings where there wasn't a double opportunity. Eventually, on the last stone, Yannick, their skipper, or last stone throw, Benoit Schwartz made a great double for 7, and that was game over. So I think John's probably thinking a little bit about that, leaving too many of the opponent's stones in the rings when he doesn't have the last stone advantage.
Absolutely. And that's always the thing, that kind of thing is always possible. We sort of take for granted how good these players are, how many shots they make. You don't see a lot of obvious misses all the time. And even that end where they gave up the 7, I was watching that game. John's team really didn't have a whole lot of zeros. Like, there weren't a whole lot of shots that just completely missed flashes or throwing draws through the rings. It was a lot of just, they were trying to make really precise freezes. They bumped off. They were maybe like 3-4 inches too heavy. They bumped off, and Yannick's team just kept making them pay. They made some really nice hit and rolls behind, and like you said, just left a bunch of rocks sitting around the rings. And if you do that a lot, eventually you're going to get the opportunity to bring them into play.
Well, blue is shot stone right now, the rock that Matt Cam is standing beside in the house. Red is second and third shot. I think you got to remove the blue and try to leave this shooter in a spot where there isn't a triple.
Absolutely. I was thinking, I don't know if they are going for the double. The double is really tough, especially with the broom position where it is. If you hit that rock closer to center line to make the double, it's going to be very close to jamming. So this might be more of just a nose hit to try and sit, I guess it would be 3. And yeah, you just got to be careful that you don't leave an easy triple for Mike.
He makes the hit, stays right there.
And I don't see a triple. Unless, yeah, no, I don't see it. Unless you can throw a missile, but I just don't think the angles work out for you. So probably just going to take the opportunity to get their 1 here. It's difficult to say. It doesn't look like a nose hit on the red rock top of the 8-foot will get it for you. So with this broom, he could just be drawing the other side of the 4-foot or try to play a little bit of a hit and roll to possibly get your 1. But I think it's sort of mission accomplished if you're John here. There was definitely some opportunities for Mike in this end, but he did well to sort of limit them and force Mike into making a cute shot here for 1.
It looks like a draw to me based on Mike's slide out. Might have a little bit of backing to work with, but I think it's just going to be a straight draw into the full 4-foot. Sweepers were cleaning it in. Now they've backed off, but I think it looks okay. Settles in the back of the 4. It is a single point for Team McEwen. They close the gap 2-1 after 2 ends of play.
Imagine being able to stream every curling game from every sheet from any event, be it your Wednesday league game, bonspiel, or corporate event. Curling Stadium offers an all-inclusive streaming solution featuring high-quality cameras, ease of use, great reliability, and minimal installation. Offering your sponsors customizable ad space on your streamed curling games and being able to sell video packages to your corporate events for increased revenue. With Curling Stadium, you can stream to any device, be it your mobile phone, tablet, or computer. Push the feed to your desired platform, be it Facebook, YouTube, or any other social media. Curling Stadium is simply the way forward. Where it's commonplace in other sports to televise every game, we want to do the same. Curling is a global sport, and it's time it gets the coverage it needs. Make your curling club the next Curling Stadium.
SaskTel Be Kind Online wants to stop cyberbullying. Want in on the action? We award up to $1,000 for youth initiatives that help spread kindness and prevent bullying. What great idea do you have to help stop bullying? SaskTel can help. Go to BeKindOnline.com and apply for a grant today. Together, we can make a difference.
Welcome back to Martensville Curling Stadium, where the battle rages on. Team Epping leading Team McEwen 2-1 here in our featured sheet. My name is Jason Chang, Matt Hall with me. There are 3 other games on the ice, draw 8. Team Clancy Grandy against Silvana Tiranzoni on the women's side. Yannick Schwaller playing against Kyler Kleibrink. Nancy Martin playing against Brett Barber, also on the women's side. And of course, our game here, Team Epping against Team McEwen. And of course, with Curling Stadium, you can stream every single game of every single draw from the Curling Zone YouTube channel. If you're joining us on CBC, welcome as well, wherever you might be. Well, Matt, mission accomplished, as you said, for Team Epping, forcing Team McEwen to 1 point. It was looking maybe a little bit scary for Team Epping for a while, but they do get the force, and that's going to help his force efficiency stats.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to come into this game with a favorite, but I think if you were going to pick one, I might have picked a slight favorite towards Mike, especially with John coming off that. Well, I mean, the scoreboard doesn't look pretty against Schwaller 9-2, but you can really chalk that up to one bad end to finish it off when he gave up the 7. But Mike has looked pretty strong in the game they lost to Yanagisawa last night. Was a bit of a heartbreaker, but it was a very close game, and their team played very well in that game, just sort of let it slip away. So very good start here by John Epping, sort of getting everything they wanted out of those last 2 ends, getting a steal to start and then a force, really putting them in a position of control this game. So it's going to be up to Mike to really force the envelope and try to put John into some uncomfortable situations and hope you get some slight misses out of him that you can capitalize on.
Matt, I think a lot of curling fans hear terminology like force efficiency or hammer efficiency. Can you explain a little bit what that means to the viewers?
Yeah, so your hammer efficiency is just looking at all the ends that you have hammer and that you end up scoring with the hammer. How many times are you actually able to generate 2 or more points out of it? So in the simplest sense, the strategy of the game, it chops down to you want to score 2 or more with the hammer, and you want to limit the other team to 1 without the hammer. If you can fit a couple steals in there for your team, that's great. But especially at this highest level, you can never really guarantee the steal. It always comes down to maybe a slight miss by your opponents, which doesn't happen too often. But if you can stick to that basic strategy of scoring multiple with the hammer, that's your hammer efficiency. And of course, the flip side, your force efficiency, is how well you can force the other team to fewer than 2 points when they have the hammer. So these teams the best in the world because they are the best in the world at those specific stats. They're great at scoring multiple points when they need to or when they want to with the hammer, and uh, keeping the other team down when they don't. So when you have two of them playing against each other, it's always sort of a battle of wills to see who can come out on top in that sort of aspect. But that's generally how you want to break down the game, and then how you actually execute that is a lot more tricky once you get into the actual game of it. But
Well, the Snats man himself, Jerry Gertz, I've always heard him say that there's a really strong correlation in terms of your world ranking based on how good your hammer efficiency is, or how high your hammer efficiency is, and how good your force efficiency is.
absolutely, those are the two most important numbers, I guess, if you wanted to break down curling in that way. How do we judge one team or the other, or how good a team is? Looking at those two numbers is a great indicator. Um, how you make those numbers better is an entirely different beast. So a lot of teams will sort of take those numbers with a bit of a grain of salt when they want to sort of improve themselves. It's more working on your technical abilities, your strategy, and all the tools that you have on the ice to actually make those better. But absolutely, when you're trying to compare two teams, look at those numbers. That's a good rule of thumb to try and figure out maybe who the stronger team should be.
You almost can make an analogy with baseball, right? That hammer efficiency is sort of like your batting average. You want that batting average to be really high.
Absolutely. I was just thinking about obviously baseball is a sport that is really sort of dominated by numbers and statistics. The sabermetrics that they have in that game really help you break down the sport in a mathematical way. Um, Curling can sort of definitely be done the same way. We maybe don't have as in-depth stats as them, but absolutely, your hammer efficiency is like your batting average. Your force efficiency is probably going to be like your ERA for your pitchers and keeping the other team from scoring.
Well, there are some rocks in play here, but right now nothing is really a huge threat to Team Epping except for that off-center guard. Everything's away from the forefoot at the moment, and Team Epping's got a couple of red stones hanging about.
Yeah, if you're John, I think you sort of love how this end has turned out so far. You can try and work around those rocks at the back of the rings. Really try to go pretty aggressive and score your two. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, the one side of the sheet is wide open, and all those rocks in the back of the rings. At this level, you're not too worried about having to outdraw those stones. Um, Now, as I say that, we saw, Mike miss that draw in the first end. It does happen from time to time, but as an elite skip, you're not worried about rocks in the back of the rings or even rocks that aren't in the forefoot. You're going to feel pretty confident about drawing the forefoot most of the time. So he can really sort of go hard for his multiple score here. And if it doesn't work out, he's always going to have an out for himself at the end.
Team Epping is giving this situation quite a lot of thought here. Pat Jansen, second stone thrower, there's his second stone of this end. I think they're thinking about whether they want to move one of those blue stones, because blue, I believe, is sitting shot and second shot stone right now. So if you can start moving those blue ones out, you may make those rocks along the 12-foot count for you.
No, my initial thought was maybe to move that one on the center line in the back of the rings. The problem is if you do that, Mike can sort of just draw around the guard again and sit two. So I think what they've decided instead is not to run this red back, but just try and tap it to a position that's frozen on the stone and back left of the 8-foot. If you can get it in a really good spot, it's going to be very difficult for Mike to remove.
Would you ever consider just peeling off that center guard? That's really the only rock that could get you into any trouble for Team Epping.
Absolutely. That was something that crossed my mind. But again, I think with how much curl there is in that we've been seeing this weekend, worst case scenario, that guard isn't necessarily something that John is too worried about. I think worst case scenario, Mike might be able to draw the side of the forefoot around that guard or side of the button, but there's going to be a lot of space where John would always have the opportunity to come back and make a light tap. or just a draw to the button to score his point. So I agree with you. It's maybe if it was later in the game, 6th end, 7th end, you're not necessarily trying to run up the score or anything like that. You're just sort of thinking very short term about just winning the game. You might see him walk up and peel that guard. But he sort of has free reign to really go for it and do whatever he wants here. So he decided instead to play a bit more aggressively and work on the tap, but maybe didn't tap it quite far enough because Ryan Fry is going to be asked to try and make a double here.
Yeah, you talked about the curl in the ice. We've seen at least 4 feet of curl for all the teams, depending on the team and the thrower, maybe even 5.5 feet of curl, very consistent. So that guard being quite high, as you mentioned, pretty easy for Team Epping to draw around it into the 4-foot if the end doesn't shape up well. There's a hidden roll, gets it half buried behind that center guard. It's Ryan Fry throwing the third stones.
Yeah, that's a great shot by Ryan Fry there. I mean, possible they were going for that from the start. I didn't see if they were going for the double or the hit and roll, but either way, a great outcome. Rolls half open, but I think if you were going to roll, that's the spot you want to. For John to really make a play at this, it's going to be difficult to not jam it on that blue stone on the center line back of the rings. So they're probably going to bring the weight down, throw a nice hack weight, try to move it out through the hole and stick around in the 8-foot, but a very delicate shot coming here by Matt Camp.
Yeah, that's very heads up line call and sweeping for Team McEwen, because if it was half open on the other side of the guard, you probably can make the double and stick the shooter.
A big sweep here by Scott Chadwick trying to get it in there. Looks like he's done quite well. Just pushes the blue shot out through that hole. Not out of the rings, but I think that's job done if you're Team Epping. And now I think you're maybe in a little bit of trouble again if you're Mike. John has the rings split quite well. You're really going to have to be careful, really put these hit and rolls in good spots to try and force John to group up his redstone so you don't get caught giving up another multiple score here early in the game.
You want to roll this behind the center guard again?
Yes, absolutely. I think possibly roll to the same spot they just did, or I think maybe a little bit further. I think you'd like to show the rock, if anything, more on the center line side so that John would have to roll towards his redstone if he made the hit, but unfortunately just doesn't get enough curl, noses it. I believe John is still shot, so once again, just sort of a free call here by John. Where do you want to put that second stone? I don't think there's space on the other side of the rings really, so he's going to have to use this center guard in play. I like what he was initially thinking, going deep in the rings. If you ever try and go top 8 here and you make it really good, you give the opportunity to Mike to make a good hit and roll right underneath, and then that rock that you just threw top 8 is basically another guard for him. So if you put this in the back of the rings, it's a very difficult double for Mike to pull off, and he has to be very careful. He doesn't have that free opportunity to make a hit and roll behind or a draw behind, because we've seen how much curl there is here. John will be able to try and follow him down and pick it out. So I believe just trying to make a freeze on the blue stone back of the 8-foot.
Matt Tan being asked to play a freeze to the back of the back blue stone. Try to sit 2 that way. Again, leaving that full 4-foot open. We've got last rock. Really important to keep the 4-foot free.
Difficult to tell if they stuck around for second shot. What do you think, Jason? I'm going to put you on the spot here.
It's very close right now.
They've already
probably
taken
get a bit of an indication based on what Mike is playing, although he probably has to make a play on that shot stone, red stone on the side of the, maybe just nibbling the side of the 4.
Yeah, I think either way, it probably doesn't change the call. I think you're always going to hit this rock side 4 and try and either roll in behind the guard, or even if you don't roll buried, you roll a little bit less, leave it wide open. That's now just a big wall at the back of the ring. So it's going to be very tough for John to get rid of it. I think I might have seen a bit of a broom tap that makes them think that blue might be second shot. So even if you just sort of push it out the left side and just roll into the foot or two into the 4 foot wide open, you're still going to be sitting two and leave a tough opportunity for John to get a multiple score.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm looking at the overhead right now. I do believe you're right. It is blue is second shot, so Mike's going to make you hit, try to sit two. But it does look like no matter what Mike does, the blue-blue double probably is going to be left at some point.
I think so, unless it looks like he's going to roll a bit too far here, roll out. I do agree. I really don't think there was a way to leave the double, but obviously just a little bit of a miscue there by Mike McEwen's team, again, rolling out and just leaving an open hit. Yes, you would have left the double, but obviously you would rather force John to throw the double over just the open hit. So not sure if he was maybe just trying a little bit too hard to get that roll and they just lost the line a little bit, or just unsure about the ice maybe over on that side of the sheet. We are right up against the sideboards here, so there might be something there, but either way, opportunity lost and the chance for John to hit and sit too.
Now, do you want to roll behind the guard here, or do you want to maybe do a half roll, get half behind the guard, something that you can still raise up if Mike tries to go around everything?
I think you'll be okay if you try and play the hit and roll. Looks like this bluestone is high enough that with any sort of like a normal hit weight, you're probably not going to roll behind the T line. That's the only thing you sort of want to avoid. If there was a way to roll behind the T line, behind the guard, that's the only thing you don't want to do. So I think a nose hit is good. It makes it really difficult for Mike to make a double or sort of put his rock in a good spot, but I think it's high enough you could play the hit and roll under and still be okay.
There's the hit, gets a bit of a roll. Rolls it into the full 8, shot stone.
And I think that does the job. It's just as good. I would be surprised if Mike ignored that rock that John just threw. I think pretty good opportunity to make the hit and roll under the guard himself and force John into a tough shot. And even if you don't make it right under the guard, if you overroll a little bit into the open, like I was talking about earlier, there's sort of a wall of rocks at the back of the ring. So you have the opportunity for John to catch the rock somewhere. And a little bit of a fall there by Mike. I'm sure he'll be okay. But if you roll a little bit into the open, it'll probably, you still have a little bit of a savior with that wall at the back. So looks like Mike's fine.
So certainly some sort of a hit and roll, try to get behind the guard, but like you said, even if it rolls open, Team Epping, they'll have to negotiate the hit and push it by all that wall and try to still hold the shooter for the two.
Absolutely. At this level, it's a lot more about, it's not always about what you make, but it's about what you leave your opponents. And you want to just consistently go through the game and leave tough shots for your opponents. And if you can do that over and over again, that's how you force them into those little errors that open up opportunities for you. So I'm sure he'd love to make the perfect roll behind the guard, but he always has that little bit of tolerance in his mind. What's sort of the second best outcome that we can get here?
Well, John Epping leading 2-1. Mike McEwen facing a couple right now on his last skip stone, trying to make a hidden roll to sit shot stone. Force John into a tough shot for a couple, but this one jams. It's okay, though. I think it's far enough.
It is far enough.
Shot stone right now?
Right, it is far enough, but he didn't get that roll in that he was looking for. So John looks like he's just shot stone. It'll be an open draw here for two. So, yeah, I mean, it's not been a solid 3 ends here by Mike's team, and credit where credit's due. John's team has capitalized on every opportunity they've gotten here, and this is another one, an open draw to the 8-foot for 2 points.
Yeah, and you only need full 8 here, so lots of room to draw to. John Epping already leading 2-1 after stealing 2 in the first, forcing McEwen to 1 in the second, and now an opportunity for 2 more here in the third.
This is the same spot where Mike slipped a little bit deep in the first end on his last one, but this one looks good. The sweepers seem to like it. And right down into the back of the 4-foot for 2 points. So a 4-1 lead for Team Epping after 3 ends of play.
For victims of domestic abuse, fleeing may mean leaving everything behind. There is hope. SaskTel provides brand new cell phones so that starting over is possible. Learn more at SaskTel.com/fresh start.
Imagine a place with endless possibilities. Imagine a place where people come together to build families, businesses, and communities. Imagine a place where small town values and progressive qualities are in perfect harmony. Imagine a place rich with so much vitality. Imagine your future in Martensville.
Welcome back to Curling Stadium, Martensville International, continuing coverage of our event here in Martensville, Saskatchewan. If you're just joining us, my name is Jason Chang. With me, Matt Hall, 2019 Canadian World Junior Champion. Just saw Team Epping execute another excellent end, got 2 with hammer, and they are up 4-1 against their provincial rivals now, Team Mike McEwen. Matt, Team McEwen, they seem to be just a little bit off in the positioning of the stones, not getting the rolls quite the right way. It is the 4th end. They're down by 3. They've got to get some offense going, don't they?
Yeah, and you know what I will say, that they aren't far off. I think we've talked a little bit about, Mike's team maybe not being as sharp, but as I was saying at the end of that last end, John's team has made them pay every single time they've had a miss. So credit to them. They are playing very well. Mike's team is really going to have to sort of pull it all together if they want to come out on top of this game. But yeah, they're really not that far. It's just slight misses, not quite getting the rolls they're looking for on freezes, maybe not just coming up maybe a foot light or a foot heavy. They really aren't that far off, but with how well John's team has played the last 3 ends, they've made the scoreboard look the way it is. So Mike's team really behind the 8 ball now. I think in this sort of a situation with only 5 ends left, usually we see only about a 5% win chance. But that's, of course, in general. And I think early on in the year, mistakes happen on both sides. So it might be a little bit better than that. But that sort of gives you an idea of just how far behind you can get with just giving up a couple bad ends early in the game.
A quick update on the scores from the other sheets in the women's event. Clancy Grandy out of British Columbia leading Silvana Tirinzoni 2-1. Team Grandy with last stone in the 4th end. Nancy Martin, she's 2-1 in this tournament, and she's jumped out to a 4-0 lead against Brett Barber from Saskatchewan as well. Nancy Martin, if you don't recognize the name, she played with Sherry Anderson, the legendary Sherry Anderson, for the last few seasons, making the Scotties. Nancy Martin also has paired up with Tyrell Griffith in the past, and mixed doubles have had a lot of success there as well. Matt, I think they were trying to play a double corner or corner guards and the second corner guard on the opposite side, but this one slips into the rings.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was talking about. Like, their misses aren't, well, I mean, that one's not great. You want to Obviously, you want to keep those guards out of the rings, but maybe just that little bit heavy and sort of you're seeing mistakes that they don't often make. And this is, of course, the first event for this team as the season, so we don't necessarily expect perfection. But Brent Lang's been around the game for a long time, so you don't normally see those kinds of big errors by him. But that's sort of been the tail of the tape so far, at least for the first three ends. And John capitalizes on it again, making the hit and rolling towards maybe a little bit far and giving Mike the opportunity to play a freeze here, but does choke off that corner guard a little bit, and it makes the precision of Mike's shots that much more important now if you want to try and generate 2 points.
So Mike asking John Duke to play a freeze onto that red stone that's behind the corner guard. That's one way to utilize your opponent's stone to your advantage. We talked about the former teammate battle between on the former Team Epping side, but John Duke playing now with Mike McEwen, and he has a former teammate in Scott Chadwick who throws leaf now for John Epping. They used to play with Scott McDonald out of Ontario.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of storylines here. We've talked a lot about the skips, but absolutely both of those guys playing with Scott McDonald a few years ago, making it to the Brier and doing quite well for themselves there. Both of them moved on after that and played with Tanner Horgan last year, made the Ontario Tankard, I believe played in a few slams. But I think the biggest accomplishment for them there was making the Olympic trials last year out of the pre-trials. So definitely a lot of experience already from those two, and I'm sure they're having a little bit of extra fun playing against each other here today.
And of course, with Mike McEwen now out of Ontario, you've got John Epping, and of course, you've still got the ageless, the timeless Glenn Howard playing Ontario. This just made the Ontario field that much stronger. And Matt, I'm going to ask you, are you playing this year? We can add you to the mix as well.
No, I'm not playing this year. I've decided to step away from the sport for not forever, but at least for a little bit, focus on my career, my personal life. I heard that, I heard Mike was coming, and I decided that's enough for me for a little bit. I've been trying to push against John and Glenn for a few years now, and you throw Mike into the mix. I think now's the perfect time for me to maybe step away and let everybody else fight it out and tire themselves out for a little bit, but
Well,
not gone forever.
You're making a bit of a Serena Williams announcement, evolving away from competitive curling, but not retiring, you're saying?
No, I mean, you know how curling works. You got to retire at least like 3 or 4 times before it becomes official. So this is just my first one. I'll be back at some point when I feel ready for it, but there's other priorities that I'm focusing on right now in my life. And this end has sort of, devolved a little bit for Mike. Maybe another just sort of bit of a miscue on John's last rock there, left a double. Matt Cam came down, made the easy double, rolled to a spot that might give Mike a bit of an opportunity here if he can freeze one into the pocket, but certainly I'm sure Mike didn't want to be looking at 4 red stones with no guards up halfway through the end.
Yeah, certainly not a great look if you're trying to take multiple points here in this fourth end to close up the gap. I think Mike would really like to score a couple here. This is a even end. We talk a lot about even and odd ends and trying to score when you have hammer in the evens.
Absolutely, and the math sort of defends that, and I think there's always going to be a lot of people that aren't necessarily fans of breaking down sports into math terms. Of course, with my background in math, it's my degree, so I'm just one of those people that likes to do that. But definitely, having the hammer in the even ends is huge, especially in a short 8-end game. We're going into the second half now. If you really think about it, if you sort of take blanks out of the equation, Mike sort of has 3 hammers to 2. with John will theoretically have hammer in the 5th and 7th ends, while John will have hammer in 4, 6, and 8. So still the opportunity to come back. And I think if you're Mike, you sort of have to try and utilize that opportunity if you can. You need to score a couple deuces. If you can get more, that's great, but you got to keep thinking about clawing back, especially with only 5 ends remaining. So a great shot there by Ryan Fry to set something up, but with no guards up, John can just come down, rearrange some things, open it up. It's going to be a very difficult place still to get to.
You do have to be a little bit careful if you're Team Epping, right? If you leave too many of your own stones in play, because those act as catchers or things that Team McEwen could freeze on.
Yeah, and I think one good thing about it, yeah, I agree. If you're John, you're up 3 points. You don't have the hammer, but you're not really interested in leaving a bunch of rocks sitting around the rings that Mike can use. That being said, all the rocks, with the exception of the one maybe over on the right, are above the tee line. So if Mike freezes to those stones, he's not going to be shot over them, which is a good thing if you're John Epping. And just like I said, he comes down, makes a little bit of a tap, unlocks the freeze. So now that's a free hit for the blue, and he's still sitting 5 red rocks around. So Mike's going to have to really think about what he wants to do here, what kind of angles he wants to set up to try and get a 2 going for him. Because if not, like we saw yesterday, these ends or the games can get out of control really quickly when you're leaving a bunch of opposing stones sitting around.
Quick update on the other men's game out on the ice right now. Team Yannick Schwaller from Switzerland, they are leading Kyler Kleibrink 4-2 after 3 ends. They're in the 4th. Team Kleibrink, they have last stone advantage. As you can see a feature sheet, Team Epping 4, Mike McEwen 1. Team McEwen now having a bit of a Zoom conference call here, deciding how they're going to try to generate a multiple score out of this situation with no guards, but a bunch of Epping stones in the rings. They've got to rearrange some of the Epping stones back to the back of the rings, right? They got to play some sort of a tap or rearrangement shot.
Absolutely. And I think the longer I look at this, the less I'm happy about it if I'm Team McEwen. But I think your path to sort of getting a multiple score here has to start with those rocks on the center line. Those 3 stones that are all sitting there, 2 of them frozen on the button. You're going to have to move those eventually if you want to score. And coming down to Vice's last rocks here, this might be the time where I would decide to do that. Maybe play a bit of a tap. It looks like he's maybe decided just to play the nose hit, which works as well. But then again, you are removing red stones that could help you. But it looks like they've decided to go with the nose hit, although maybe a little bit wide here by Ryan Fry. Well, not the outcome you're looking for.
No,
a little
those
bit.
2 red stones stacked up in the top of the 4 still. They certainly wanted a bit more spreading of those red stones. Probably wanted a couple of them to go away, but also move some of them away from that 4-foot area.
Yeah, and I think probably what they decided is that there were just too many red stones sitting around to really play some light taps or too much maneuvering of them. They decided to go with a little bit more weight, get rid of a couple red stones, and you hope that you leave 2 blue rocks in the rings that John can't make a double. But unfortunately, rolling out and that kind of, with those 2 red stones still sitting top 4, erases all opportunity for a multiple score here if you're Mike. So he may just have to switch up his game plan, be happy with taking a single and moving to the back half of the game down 2 without, which is I don't think I need to explain, is not a fun situation, not where you want it to be if you were Mike.
And even taking 1 point now for Mike McEwen, it won't be the most routine single. They're going to have to move, I think, these 2 red stones in the 4-foot area to open up a score path for yourself.
Yeah, and you might see a bit of a throwaway shot by Mike, possibly double something off. And even if he loses his shooter, it at least opens up the opportunity for him to score with his last shot. You'll probably see him try to make some kind of a double. It's difficult to make the double on the redstones on the center line and still stick around uh, in the 8-foot. So you might see him come off the rock on the left side of the rings, which looks to be like what Ryan is possibly indicating. But either way, you're not really looking at any kind of shot where you're going to keep your shooter around in a spot where John won't be able to just hit it out. This is really just the opportunity to open up the 4-foot and give Mike the opportunity to draw with his last one for a single point.
I think you're right. The shooter that Mike's going to throw probably will be easily removed, but I think it is important for him to keep it around because that probably will force John Epping to make a play on it. Harder for John to position his shooter stone if he's making a hit and roll rather than just a draw to somewhere in the house where he can really block off the scoring area. Looks like he's playing some weight at this. Definitely want to move those rocks off the 4-foot if he can. Those two that are right there along that center line.
Yeah, I think you could come off the rock on the left side, but you're probably not getting everything moving. So I think best opportunity here would be to throw peel weight, try to hit those center line rocks, maybe just a little bit off nose to make sure they go. If you can stick around over side of the 8-foot or side of the rings, you might force John to hit that, and that leaves the middle of the sheet open. But either way, even if you roll out, make sure these two rocks go. John might be able to put a rock in a good spot. That forces you into a tough shot, but you'll always have something to get into the 4-foot to score at the very least.
Well, he makes the double, loses the shooter. Not sure if that's the double he was intended, because it leaves shot stone that's nibbling the button, perhaps, right there. And John can really cut down the scoring area here with a nice placement of this draw, maybe somewhere in the top 8.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying, the number one goal of that shot, what you had to do was get those rocks on the 4-foot. Not even out of the rings, just out of the way, move them out into the 8-foot, open up that opportunity for them to score. But again, I believe that's the second or third shot in a row that they were a little wide there down that spot. So maybe not just adjusting correctly, or maybe some early season jitters and throws, but whatever you want to call it, it's the opportunity here for John Epping to toss up a guard or even just draw top 12, sit 3, and force Mike into a very difficult, thin double probably to score his 1 point.
Without last rock, John Epping sitting 2 already, trying to put a third rock in the rings, really make it tough for Mike McEwen. This rock's still hanging a bit wide right now. The sweepers have switched over to try to get some extra curl out of it. Does carve it over, not too bad.
And that's absolutely the perfect spot. And I've noticed that I've been watching a number of the games this week, and there's a lot of shots that just look wide. They look like they're out in no man's land halfway down the sheet, but there's so much finish in the ice that you just get that last 2 or 3 feet of curl really late, which I think a lot of these teams are very happy with, especially the elite teams. Very similar sort of movement to what you might see in a slam environment or something like that. Maybe not quite as much curl, but the movement is similar. So something they'd be used to, something I'm sure they'd be happy to see. John, of course, puts that in the perfect spot. And as I foreshadowed earlier, I think Mike sort of has to play this really thin double off the rock on the left-hand side to get his 1 point.
You mentioned that curl in the slam ice, and I think what we typically see in slam ice is a lot of late finish as the rock is slowing down, approaching the rings, some very aggressive movement near the end, and that helps teams make a lot of finesse shots, and this ice is reminiscent of that. Maybe not quite as much curl or finish, as you said, as slam ice, but get pretty close to that. Well, here we go. Final stone for Mike McEwen, in some trouble once again in the 4th end. Facing 3, looking for a thin double. Hold the shooter to score 1.
It's very
Pretty close. There it is. Well executed for Team McEwen. So a tough end for them, but they managed to come away with a single point, narrows the deficit. It's 4-2. Team Epping, we're halfway through this match.
We asked Saskatchewan what they know about 5G.
More speed, more innovation.
It's gonna make our lives a whole heck of a lot easier.
This is what 5G looks like.
Better, faster.
Sounds like one more G. Sounds pretty good.
I don't know what it means.
All you really need to know is the future of 5G is here and will continue improving through investments in network technology.
Imagine being able to stream every curling game from every sheet from any event, be it your Wednesday league game, Bonspiel, or corporate event. Curling Stadium offers an all-inclusive streaming solution featuring high-quality cameras, ease of use, great reliability, and minimal installation. Offering your sponsors customizable ad space on your streamed curling games and being able to sell video packages to your corporate events for increased revenue. With Curling Stadium, you can stream to any device, be it your mobile phone, tablet, or computer. Push the feed to your desired platform, be it Facebook, YouTube, or any other social media. Curling Stadium is simply the way forward. Where it's commonplace in other sports to televise every game, we want to do the same. Curling is a global sport, and it's time it gets the coverage it needs. Make your curling club the next Curling Stadium.
Imagine a place with endless possibilities. Imagine a place where people come together to build families, businesses, and communities. Imagine a place where small town values and progressive qualities are in perfect harmony. Imagine a place rich with so much vitality. Imagine your future in Martensville.
Welcome back to the Curling Stadium, Martensville International, fifth end here between Mike McEwen and John Epping, both from Ontario. If you're just joining us, my name is Jason Chang. We'll bring you the action from the ice to your device for the second half of the game, and with me is 2019 Canadian World Junior Champion Matt Hall. We've seen the first half of the game, Matt. Team Epping pretty much controlling all of those ends and forcing Mike McEwen into some tough shots. As a result, Team Epping leading 4-2 here in the fifth with Last Rock. Matt, what does Mike McEwen have to do to try to change the complexion of the second half of the game?
Well, I think it's really time you got to go for it now. I talked a little bit earlier in the game how you can never really count on steals. You really want to go into the game plan of, scoring two with hammer, forcing the other team when you don't. But even if Mike was able to perfectly execute that game plan, take two deuces and force John twice in the back half of this game, he's still going to the extra end without hammer. And John probably has at least an 80-85% chance to win with hammer in the extra. So you can't really just go with that game plan anymore if you want a realistic chance to win this game. You have to do your best to try and force John into some very difficult shots and come out of it with a steal. And I think that's what you're seeing right now, Mike, going with the two center guards and allowing John the opportunity to get two shot stones sitting here, but you're going to try and get something set up, get some good angles, force John into hopefully a couple misses that you might be able to get some rocks in good spots and play for the steal. But it's no longer the time where you can just sit back and go with the general strategy. You sort of have to put the game on the line and push things now while you can.
Yeah, so what you're saying is if you try to force one, get two, you're tied after 8, but you're at a huge underdog in the extra end without last stone. That's why I think you see these days many teams take extraordinary tough shots to win the game in the 8th end because they know the chances of stealing that extra end are very, very slim.
Yeah, you see it a lot at the highest levels. You see it a lot in the Grand Slams, for sure. When you get into that last end and you think about going into one end without the hammer, for the highest men's teams in the world, I know the number's around 90%. to win with hammer. So if you have a shot in the 8th then that even you only make maybe 15% of the time, that's still 5% better than trying to steal an extra. So you see teams play some really tough shots and really go hard. And in a game like this where you're down 2 without the hammer with only 4 ends left, that sort of thinking trickles back even further. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Mike's team maybe take on some unconventional shots that you wouldn't have seen them go for early in the game, to try and force some misses out of John's team.
Yeah, so you're really looking for a steal if you're Mike McEwen when you don't have hammer, or when you get the hammer back, looking at trying to get 3 at some point.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great, but getting 3 or stealing 1, these are things you can't count on at this highest level of the game. So it's really going to come down to, I think the game sort of hinges on John's team. If they can just sort of go through with their game plan, keep making shots the way they have been in the first half of this game, it's going to leave very little opportunity for Mike to claw back.
Well, we see 2 center guards on a bit of a stagger for Mike McEwen out in front. That's a good situation, other than the fact that Team Epping's got 2 rocks behind that, shot in second, shot stone, that are hard to access right now. Team McEwen looking for a clockwise draw, maybe try to freeze to the back redstone, Matt?
Yeah, and I think if I was looking at the situation, there's really only 1 saving grace, I guess, if you're Mike McEwen. Yes, those guards are a little bit staggered, which is really nice for you, but they're very close to each other. So it should be a very, very straightforward double peel for Pat Jansen or Matt Cam. The one thing you do love about the situation, if you're Mike McEwen, is that first rock by Brent Lang's slipped, or not Brent Lang, excuse me, Scott Chadwick, slipped a little bit behind the T line. So you see them come down there and make a little bit of a very nice freeze on the corner. It's difficult to tell if they ended up getting shot stone out of it, but I don't think you're necessarily worried about that at the moment. If you're Mike, you can always come down, make some small taps, make some little bit of adjustments, but getting that good freeze down means it's going to be very difficult for John to remove. And that's exactly the kind of thing that I was discussing earlier. You need to force John's team to make precise shots, make slightly more difficult shots so that hopefully you can get a miss out of them. And that's exactly the kind of start you're looking for. Now you can sort of just guard this stone for a long time, or make a corner freeze on the 1 top 8 whenever you feel like it. And it's going to be difficult for John to remove that blue rock without leaving it there and ending up with a steal for Mike. So it was a great shot there by John Buke with his last, and it gives them the opportunity to now sit back and sort of hold the momentum going forward in this end.
Yeah, I think Ryan Fry being asked to play that corner freeze onto that redstone that's in the top of the 8, even if it ends up as another guard, it's pretty good. This one is maybe a little bit on the heavy side.
Got to be really careful with the angle here if it is a little heavy.
That might be okay.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it. It honestly, it looked heavier coming into the rings, and possibly just the cameras made it look that way, but ended up in a pretty good spot. Maybe over curled just a little bit. It's not directly angled onto that back red stone, but all in all, given with the throw that they were given, not a bad result. It's still going to be very difficult to get rid of those blue stones. Although if you're John, I think you're looking long and hard at running this center guard back. And if you can angle that red rock top 8 into those blue ones, get them moving, you're not too worried if you leave Mike sitting shot 1 afterwards, but at least you open up the rings, preferably get rid of that red rock at the back of the button, because that's really hurting John. I think the one rock that's sort of annoying you a lot is that rock back button that they're freezing to. So if you can even just get the blues moving, or move that redstone further back to the back of the rings, just unlock it, that's really all you're hoping for. And then if you're John, you're just looking at maybe later, you'll have the opportunity for a hit and get rid of a couple blues after that.
So you really want to clip something on the way by here, right? When you run this back?
Absolutely. This isn't a straight peel. You'd love to hit it pretty close to nose. I think if you dead nose it, that will angle that redstone into the blue ones. But your goal here is, I I don't think you're trying to be all that precise about sticking the red one. Just get those blues moving. So hit it somewhere near the nose, get that red rock top 8 into that blue pile, and unlock everything for you later.
Although based on that ice, they may have ended up just going for the straight peel there at the end.
Yeah, I'm a bit, and with the line call too, they had the sweeper on it, so maybe
they
it's
didn't think
difficult
they
to
needed to move it right away, but
Yeah,
Nick's going to just put up the guard back up, and they're going to put up the blue guard, so it's going to be more tricky to run in on this one.
yeah, I'm a little bit surprised. I guess that the theory there might be that it might be one rock too early in the end, that you can sort of delay a little bit and play this run back on Matt's next stone. Um, but it's difficult to say. Possibly looking at the overhead, red might still be shot. So the thinking there might be you straight peel, you keep peeling the guards out of the way. Eventually, Mike is going to have to come into the rings and do something. And in order to do that, he needs to move the blue stones and the red stone anyway, which is kind of what you want. So John might be just delaying a little bit here. And once Mike makes that play in the rings, if he doesn't make that little bump or little adjustment perfectly, you're going to have the opportunity for a double, possibly a triple, to really sort of get out of this end and come away with what you want. The other issue I was thinking with that peel is now when Mike throws this guard, now it's their color. So you are a little bit more hesitant about running it back, but looking at how quickly they decided on that shot, I think that is the game plan, that they just want to make the straight peels, keep delaying, force Mike to decide when he's going to make a move in the rings. He's going to have to come down, make some slight adjustments, and when he does that, you might have the opportunity to get some blues moving. That being said, if Mike does end up making a shot perfectly, it might be a little bit more difficult to get a lot of blues moving, although he will always have that red rock top 8 to angle in. So I think that's sort of what John is thinking. He always has that out of that short angle run back. Mike has to be perfect, and if he's not perfect, you're going to have a great opportunity.
And with that guard, the last guard that was just peeled off being a bit higher, I think Mike McEwen deliberately played it a bit high to induce the straight peel rather than the run-in. If they had put it really tight, John Epping probably would have taken a run with the run-in.
Yeah, I think, if you end up slipping maybe top 12 and it's a lot easier of a run back, then he might take a little bit longer look at it because it was so high. You just peel it off. You just wait. You force. I mean, it's very clear with the scoreboard the way it is, the fact that John has hammer, John's in the driver's seat. If Mike wants to win this game, he's the one that's going to have to take on a little bit more risk, force the issue, try to make small adjustments in the rings. And, Mike, everyone on Mike's team is very good, but can you expect them to make those really precise shots perfectly for the rest of the game? Probably not. So if you're John, you don't necessarily have to push the envelope as much. You can sort of sit back and let the sort of chips fall as they might and play with what you're given, whereas Mike's the one who has to force the issue a little bit more. So it looks like they might have gone with what I was thinking earlier, which is coming down onto those blues and just sort of tapping them slightly. Fortunately, the angles are not perfect for Mike. Those blues aren't angled directly onto the red, so if you move that red, it's going to be moving out of the way of the blues. So he has to be very careful about what kind of weight he throws, how much he moves these rocks in order to try and ensure that he's putting them in a position where John won't have as much to hit. Although maybe calling an audible, throwing the guard now? I didn't see there. Ryan sort of came up and signaled possibly the guard. Was that the call from the start, do you think?
that might be. I think they have decided to play the guard. But we'll see.
So it's a little bit interesting. I thought we might have seen Mike come down and make a little bit of a movement, try to get the angles, but I guess again, you might say it's one rock too early to do that. You try and make the tap now. And like I said, you're sort of moving things around. You're giving John the opportunity to have two shots at making some rocks fly. Whereas if you wait for your last one, even if you don't make it perfect, you only give John one opportunity to sort of get out of it. Now, that being said, you do always have to be careful um, with whether or not John decides to do something right now. If he has the opportunity to possibly make a tap on that red stone in the top 8 foot, he's probably going to come into the rings and do that, and you might not have a great opportunity to make the tap later. So I think Mike knows all this when he's sort of having these discussions, when he's deciding these shots, and he's decided that he'll give John sort of the opportunity to make something good right now. And if he doesn't, Mike's going to still have that opportunity to come make that slight tap, sit shot, and then John only has one shot to uh, get himself out of this end. So again, we see maybe a little bit light, a little bit wide. Not quite making the tap perfectly, but again, still a pretty good result. I think you're happy with it if you're John. Now for Mike to make that tap, he also now has to tap the red rock back. That's one more rock you need to be moving. It's just that little bit more precise that Mike needs to be now on this. And moving a red rock is, I think you're always happy if you're forcing John to, or you're always happy if you're John forcing Mike to run or move one of your own colors back closer to the rings. Just that much more opportunity for something to go wrong and for John to have a great opportunity. So Mike's going to really have to lean back on all the knowledge he's gotten on the ice so far this game to try and make this shot as precisely as possible.
Could you play a outturn draw, the outturn for the righty, to the top side of the button on the other side and sit shot stone, partially behind the red stone that's in the top 8?
Absolutely. I think you can. I thought they might have looked at that for a little bit. I mean, it's a very precise shot. I think you might be going out to a spot that they haven't played as much, because as I think back towards the game, I think most of the play has been maybe slightly on the right side of the center line as we look at the overhead. So you might have to go out a little bit further to a spot you don't know as much. But definitely that is an option. I'm sure they discussed it or at least thought about it in part for a little bit, and they've decided to go with this tap instead. And I think it might just come down to, because they've played this spot in the sheet already so much this end and during the game specifically, that they just feel more comfortable. They feel like they have a better chance of making this shot in a spot that they know, rather than trying to make that precise draw where you have to go to maybe a little bit wider than they've seen most of the game.
Well, this is Mike McEwen's final stone of the 5th end. Trying to rearrange some of the stones in the rings, maybe sit 1 and 2 after this situation and force John to make a good shot.
It's curling a bunch.
Looks like it over curled. I'm not sure they've moved anything significantly to be shot stone.
I don't think so, but I mean, they didn't have to move it far. It's difficult to tell right now with the overhead who exactly is shot stone. But with that slight tap, I wouldn't be surprised if it was blue. As I look at it more now, I think it is blue. That is the shot rock. So I think job done if you're Mike. I don't really see a way that John can get those blue rocks moving or get them out of the forefoot the way you would have wanted. So I think it's just going to be the same shot John just tried, come down to play the tap to the button, or is he trying to throw big weight here and get something moving? With that broom, it could
the
be
tap to
either
the
shot.
button makes the most sense here, John, or Matt, but we'll see.
It's difficult to tell with the broom where it is. It could be either shot. It's pretty much the same. I thought he might have just tried to play the same shot he just did, but we'll see here in a second as he throws. Final shot for John Epping here in the fifth end.
Final stone, Team Epping up by 2 in the fifth, trying to find a way to score here. It looks like it is going to be the tap on their own stone, but it crashes on the guard. Not really sure what happened there.
A bit surprising. They didn't necessarily seem worried about it, but at the end it ends up crashing. So a steal of 1 for Mike.
SaskTel Be Kind Online wants to stop cyberbullying. Want in on the action? You can get a grant to help. We award up to $1,000 for youth initiatives that help spread kindness and prevent bullying. It's easy. SaskTel has already given away tens of thousands of dollars. There have been lots of great ideas, including kids giving cookies to others, a group set up to welcome newcomers to their school, random acts of kindness, and so much more. The ideas and opportunities are endless. What great idea do you have to help stop bullying? SaskTel can help. Go to BeKindOnline.com and apply for a grant today. Together, we can make a difference.
We are back now for the sixth end. Team McEwen getting the job done in the last end, stealing 1 to close the gap 4-3. John Epping still with last rock in the sixth. Well, Matt, Mike McEwen making it the game more interesting now.
Yeah, and they did sort of exactly what we thought they needed to do. They, were very precise, and they made tons of shots, and they forced John into some uncomfortable situations where he had to come up with some precise taps, and John had the opportunity to maybe put that game on ice a little bit if he made either one of those 2 taps that he tried, but looks like they maybe just got caught on something on that last rock. They didn't necessarily seem too worried about it out of his hand, but next thing you know, they overcurl, looks really light, wrecks on the guard, and Mike comes away with a steal. So mission accomplished, I think, that end if you're Mike, but obviously the job's not done. You're still down 1 without, not in the best position that you want to be, but if you can keep doing that, just keep putting pressure on John throughout the rest of the game, you never know. You might get a couple misses and get the opportunity to sort of escape with this game, although slipping into the rings there is not what they wanted to do.
Yeah, I had a quick look at the replay on that last shot from John Epping, and I think it probably picked about 3/4 of the way down the ice. I think it just made a bit of a turn, and that's when they lost that rock.
And that's something that, I mean, I haven't watched every game, but I've certainly tried to tune in for a handful this week, and that's not something that we've seen a whole lot of. It looks like the ice surface has been very good, and the players have enjoyed it. So we haven't seen too many picks. That one obviously coming in a big situation, but really something we haven't seen a whole lot of. And of course, this game is not over on that one shot. John is still in the driver's seat, still has control. So I think he's just got to sort of park that, put that behind him, and keep the confidence that he built through the first 4 ends of the game. I think Mike here will try and put this second guard in a better spot, just tight, preferably in a spot where John can't pick it out, because I don't think John will necessarily be too worried about that really high guard. We've talked about how much curl there is. If he had the opportunity to peel one of the guards, he would choose the tight one, but they put that in a good spot. John doesn't have an option, so he's just going to walk up and again, just sort of delay having to do anything in the rings. He knows Mike is going to have to come up with some really good shots to put pressure on him, especially after losing that second stone slipping into the rings. So he's just going to walk up. He's going to continue to peel these guards one at a time and force Mike to decide when he wants to push the envelope.
Well, this is an important game for both teams. Team Mike McEwen 2-1. They'd love to get to 3-1 and improve their playoff chances. John Epping 1-1, looking to get to 2-1. 10 teams in the field, 5 make the playoffs into the quarterfinals. We'll say the 4th and 5th seeds will play a quarterfinal match. The top 3 seeds get a bye into the semifinals. So certainly both teams want to win this game.
Absolutely. I think you don't want to drop to that second loss too early. I think with the way it's structured and half the field makes the playoffs, you're probably fine at 3-2 to get in, but there is always the opportunity of a log jam, and it might come down to I'm not sure what the tiebreaker is. I assume it's draw to the button scores, but you really don't want to get into that situation with the second loss too early in the round robin, this only being John's 3rd game, Mike's 4th. You don't want to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, because out here, especially this early in the year, anybody can beat anybody. You get that second loss too early, and you're putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation where you sort of have to win out to really be comfortable with making the playoffs.
Just looking ahead a bit, John Epping, he's got 2 matches left. Dallin Myers and Colton Flash up for his 4th and 5th matches. Team Mike McEwen, they've got Tyler Kleibrink left for their last match. So that's what's ahead for both teams, but they've got to focus on this match right now.
Yeah, and if you're John, you're looking forward. Dallin and Kleibrink have struggled a little bit this tournament, both with 2 losses already, but both of those teams having very experienced squads as well, could definitely come up with wins against you any day. But if you're John, you're really looking forward at that Colton Flash game. I think he's already 2-0 this event, coming off making the Brier out of Saskatchewan last year. They'll be the hometown or home crowd favorite in that game, I would imagine. So again, you just don't want to drop into that second loss early, and now you have to come up with a win against a experienced squad that is one of the few teams that this year that has the same lineup as last year. So they'll be comfortable with each other, especially this early in the season, and they'll be a difficult opponent, I think, to beat.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Colton Flash, one of the few teams who have kept the lineup. As you mentioned, they're kind of the hometown favorites in this Saskatchewan event, along with some of the other Saskatchewan teams, but a really nice crowd in the stands here in Martensville. You talked about, keeping the same team, different teams. I do have a question for you, Matt. You have Mike McEwen, number 20 in the world rankings, John Epping, number 17, but those are really points that they had from the previous teams that individual players brought to this new season, and now they're going to start earning points as they finish in the playoffs in each of their tour events. And how important are those points in terms of invitational tournaments, getting into those slams?
I mean, it's huge. Especially with teams of this caliber, 4 players of this caliber, if they get into slams, they're going to win a couple games. There's no doubt in my mind about that. They have the ability to do well at slams, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're they're just going to go and win a few games. They definitely have the opportunity to go deep in those tournaments too. But if you can get into a slam and at least, win a handful of games in slams throughout the season, you're generally going to get enough points to sort of keep yourself up there. So it's a big threshold that usually around number 15, somewhere in 15 to 20 is that cutoff for the Grand Slams. And it's really important that you keep yourself above that threshold, because if you can get into the slams and do decently well in it, you're going to keep enough points to stay there. And you see it especially with a lot of younger teams. Getting that ability to break through and get above that threshold and get yourself into the slams in the first place is incredibly difficult. And you see a lot of young teams struggle for a while to get themselves there. So it's incredibly important, and it's a great sort of step up that they have these points from previous years and are able to hold on to them to sort of start in that position. But it's really important that they do well in these early tournaments to keep themselves there, at least until the slams start. I believe the first one is possibly in 5 weeks. So most of these teams will be playing 2 or 3 events. You have the Curling Canada Invitational at the end of the month, which will be a good points getter for there. But it is important that they do well in these early tournaments to keep themselves above that cutoff line.
Yeah, and just mentioned Epping at number 17, McEwen at number 20. So they're just maybe right outside that threshold, depending on who accepts these invitations to the slams. They might still get in at their current position, but certainly want to get more points. So how do the points get awarded, Matt, in these tournaments? I know there's something called a strength of field multiplier in all events. I see on the men's side there's a SMF, strength of field multiplier of 4.0. Is that a really high number? And what does that mean in terms of getting points for these teams?
Yeah, so that would be a fairly high number. Maybe not as high as you'd see at some of the slams or some of the bigger events that you'd have throughout the year, but it is a good indicator of how strong the tournament is. Now, I'm a math guy, but even I, haven't are a little hesitant to dive too deep into that. Some of the formulas that they have to exactly determine that number um, are quite in depth, but the points that are awarded per event are a formula based on that strength of field multiplier, in part at least. So if that strength of field, or if the teams that are in the tournament are stronger, um, you'll end up having more points awarded for that event, because you'd imagine obviously it would be more difficult to win or do well in those events. And if the field is maybe a little bit weaker, you have a bunch of teams that are maybe lower in the world curling rankings in that event, that'll bring the strength of field down and you'll have sort of fewer points. So if you're trying to get lots of points, you sort of have to play in events with lots of good teams. And especially for younger teams, they're probably going to get beat quite a bit through the years doing that. But that's how you learn. And eventually you learn how to do well in those tournaments and earn those points to get yourself uh, across that threshold I was talking about, to get yourself into the slams and the big tournaments.
Well, Matt, thanks for that explanation. That explains why I haven't gotten my invitation yet. I got to stop playing these meat spiels, right? And actually play in some spiels where there's some points available.
Yeah, and it's difficult, especially
Well,
because
Team
you.
Epping here.
Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Sorry, I was just having a look at the rings. Team Epping up by one. They've got a couple of stones in the top of the rings. Mike McEwen with an off-center guard and one behind that. Mike is up there now getting ready to throw. You probably have to move those red stones, don't you? At least one of them. I don't know if you can move both without killing your own blue at the back.
Yeah, that's just what I was thinking. You probably, if you make sort of the double in the middle of those redstones, it probably goes over and loses um, the blue one. So I think what they're probably trying to do here is to hit the red rock furthest on the right as far as thin as you can, and that should push the other red rock over the top of the other blue stone and leave you sitting shot. Just like that. And So that leaves Mike sitting shot stone. Now with the opportunity to, they have one sitting behind the guard. Now John will have to come up with something really nice. It is on the tee line, so there is the opportunity for John just to draw and around, make a corner freeze and sit shot stone, which looks like what he's going to go for here. And it is a bit of a precise shot. I think that blue stone is maybe a little bit further back than Mike would like it to be. But again, you're forcing John into these precise freezes. If he ever doesn't make it perfect and leaves you shot, you have the opportunity to maybe toss up a guard or draw a second one in there to sit two. And that's how you get those steals, just forcing them to make these precise angles. And eventually you might get a couple misses out of it and have an opportunity.
They're going to have another look at it here. Originally, maybe just trying to get one, but maybe now thinking tapping that blue stone back for 2 points.
Well, I was thinking about it, and I actually quite like the freeze. I like the original call. One of the things that's really good about it is even if you don't make it perfect and you aren't shot stone, Mike has to be very careful because he can't just toss up a guard, because John can always just play the in-off double on the red rock on the left-hand side to remove that blue stone out of the forefoot. So if Mike just threw a guard, John might have that for two. But of course, Mike has to be careful to not just draw one into the rings because he might leave it in a spot that ends up leaving a double as well. So I think they've sort of gone back to the original call here. They're okay with playing the freeze. Even if you don't make it perfect, Mike still has to be very precise or very careful with what he does. And worst case scenario, you're probably going to have a draw to the button to score, which I think with the way they've been playing so far, John is probably going to be pretty comfortable with having.
Matt, I think we're talking about the strength field model for a little bit of time. I think this actually might be the last stone of the end.
Oh, is it? Oh, I'm sorry.
Drawing the button for one. It was a really good analysis if there were still a couple of rocks left, but it is a single point for Team Epping, and they're going to lead 5-3 after 6 ends of play.
Saskatchewan, you know SaskTel, because we're everywhere. Because being everywhere keeps us connected to you. You are what matters most. With SaskTel sponsorships, we get to be a part of your community. From the dance competitions, to the rodeos, to helping discover and embrace technology across the province, we're here with you, and we're here for you. It's easy to get started. All you need to do is apply. Every year, SaskTel contributes nearly $3 million to approximately 1,000 nonprofits, charities, associations, and events in more than 200 communities across Saskatchewan. So keep dancing, keep laughing, keep discovering, and we'll be there to help, to lend a hand, and join in the fun. SaskTel cares. Always has, always will, because we are dedicated to our home. To apply for sponsorship, visit sastel.com/sponsorships.
Imagine a place with endless possibilities. Imagine a place where people come together to build families, businesses, and communities. Imagine a place where small-town values and progressive qualities are in perfect harmony. Imagine a place rich with so much vitality. Imagine your future in Martensville.
Welcome back to Curling Stadium, Martensville. Team Epping with a single point in the 6th end. They extend their lead back to 2 points, 5-3 over Mike McEwen. These are 8 ends games, so there's 2 ends to play. Team McEwen with the hammer in the 7th. What's the strategy here, Matt, with 2 ends to play down by 2?
Well, I mean, you have to go for your 2 here. Either way, you could think about, you could get 2 here and try to steal the 8 then. You could blank here, and then you're trying to basically get 2 and steal the extra. So I've talked a couple times already. You can't ever sort of rely on getting more than two without some big misses from your opponent. So the thought here is you just got to kind of play with what you're given. Go hard here for your two. A blank at the end of the day isn't the worst because you're sort of in the same situation that you were anyways. But you're got to play hard for your two. If you ever get the opportunity, you get a couple misses by John's team and you get the chance for three. Great, obviously. Um, but yeah, your whole game plan is to take two and steal. So you're going to see some pretty aggressive play by Mike, I think, especially early on in these ends. But he's going to have to make a decision about whether to sort of go for two or maybe blink this in and go for two is next. Um, he's going to have to make that decision pretty quickly because what you don't want to end up doing here is getting forced to one, and then you have to steal eight and steal the extra to win. And as we already said, sort of trying to go for a steal in those later ends, you're maybe only successful about 10% of the time. So that's not something you want to have to do twice.
Right. You mentioned stealing the win is pretty rare already. To do it 2 times in a row is even tougher. I want to talk a little bit about some of the changes in the lineups across some of the other teams. It wasn't long ago that John Epping was one of the younger rising stars of curling, and obviously he's had a successful career. So far, he's always been one of the top-ranked teams, a perennial at the slams. He's been to a few Briars, hasn't won one yet, but I'm sure he's still salivating for that. But he's now 39 years old. There's a bunch of new young teams coming up. You played with one of them at the World Juniors, skipped by Tyler Tardy, that 2019 World Championship team. You were the second, I believe, and moved to BC to play with him. But we've seen Tyler Tardy now teaming up with Kevin Cooey, an older mentor. We've seen Mackenzie Zacharias teaming up with Jennifer Jones. Interesting to see that because Mackenzie Zacharias certainly was on the rise on the ladies' side, playing at the last couple of Scotties. Tyler Tardy was on the rise on the men's side as well. I thought maybe they would keep their teams together or at least keep skipping.
Yeah, I will say it was a little bit of a surprise. Obviously, I played with Tyler at the World Championships. We're still fairly close. We talk um, quite often, so I was a bit surprised that he didn't stick with his team. I thought he had some good years out in BC, and he had some great opportunities. But of course, at the end of the day, I think if you pick up your phone and it's Kevin Cooey asking you to play for him, uh, well, I mean, there's not really much of a decision to be made there. I think that's something that you have to take, and incredibly happy for him. I think it's something that is a great step for him in his career. I think he'll go on to do great things, and this will help him with that. I think it is something that you see a lot, and you think even back in the day, like John Epping himself. Really sort of broke out onto the men's side of things, playing as I believe it was second or vice for Wayne Madaw at the pre-trials and eventually the trials. I want to say back in '09, possibly. I might be a little bit wrong on that, but he played with Wayne Madaw, who was obviously well established for a long time. Matt Cam sort of famously, I believe, foregoed his final year of juniors to play with John Epping. And the examples that you said, it's something that you see happen over and over again throughout the years, sort of that young crop coming up, learning from the already well established players or teams, and then incorporating the information that they get from them and the experiences that they get on those teams into really forming successful or remarkable careers. So, not to say that it'll always work, but it's definitely a great opportunity for these young curlers, and it's really hard to say no. Like not or it's I don't even think they should say no. If you're someone like Mackenzie Zacharias, yes, you were well established. I believe they won Manitoba women's last year, but you have the opportunity to learn from arguably one of the greatest players to ever play the game in Jennifer Jones. And I think if you go into that with that expectation and you do everything you can to learn from that person, it's just going to make you so much better at the end of the day.
For sure, this game of curling, you're always absorbing new knowledge, and when you can learn from some of the best, That's a great way to accelerate your development, especially if you're a skip or a vice, right? Where that strategy, that mental toughness is so important. You're right, John played a little bit with Wayne Madaw, who's one of the best in the world. Won 3 Briars and World Championships at 3 different positions: second, vice, and skip. And John also played with Mike Harris, I believe, Olympic silver medalist for a little bit of time as well. So doesn't hurt to have an Olympic medalist as your mentor for a couple of years too.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. I think with these younger teams, they have the shot making ability, and I've seen it playing at that level for a number of years. There's some remarkable curlers coming up through the ranks with the likes of people like Tyler Tardy, Mackenzie Zacharias, and a lot of other names from all over the country that are already excelling and making so many shots early in their career. But it comes down to sort of those smaller intangibles, whether it's strategy, whether it's how you compose yourself out on the ice, or how you feel confident in some shots over others. Really, those small minutia that allow you to win that extra 10% of games or whatever it may be to get from really good to great. Those are kinds of the things they're picking up from those veterans, you might, if you want to call them that. Those people who have already established themselves, who have done quite well for themselves in their career, and they're passing on that knowledge to the next generation. And I think it's a good thing for curling. It's going to make us better as a sport in general. It's going to make Canada better in a world where, a lot of other countries have improved their programs to the point where they have a lot of young up and comers as well. I think it's just going to put us in a better situation moving forward as a whole, and it's good. It's a good thing to see.
Well, before we get too far into this end, let's give an update so we don't miss the last couple of stones, Matt, this time. Matt Can
Yeah,
being asked to peel off this guard, maybe catch another one of those blue stones in the rings on the way by.
absolutely. I think another pretty good setup here if you're Team McEwen. You have a blue stone, not quite corner frozen, but pretty close to that red rock in the forefoot. That's something that's maneuverable. You can make that tap up later to either frozen or put it in a good spot. But if you're John, you're very happy. There's no guards up. So at some point, uh, if Mike comes down and decides to make a play in the rings, you're going to have the opportunity to have a wide open shot, come down, make a hit, or do whatever it needs to do, make a double to try and limit the scoring for Mike. Of course, we talked before about trying to set things up for the steal. Now Mike has hammer. So your whole goal here, I think, if you're John, is just to try and force him. So you're looking for the chance to make a double, make some blue rocks fly. And there's really no like perfectly frozen rocks or some really great angles for Mike. I think regardless of what he does, you're probably always going to have some sort of spacing in order to get some blue rocks moving. So I think you're quite happy with the situation right now if you're John Epping.
And certainly for Team Epping, they'd love to force Mike McEwen to 1, but even if they give up 2, I think they'll be pretty comfortable coming home with the last stone advantage, right, Matt?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's said a lot that especially at this highest level, when you're playing men's, you play the whole game to have hammer in the last end, to be tied with. If you can somehow get some opportunities to be better than that, to have a point or two advantage as well with that, obviously that's great. But you play the whole game to be tied with, or some teams are even okay with being down 1 with. That's your whole game plan at the end of the day. So you don't need to do anything crazy. If you're John, just turn around, take a look at the scoreboard every now and then. You give up a 2, it's not the end of the world. You're still a 90% chance favorite in that last end. And if you can go into every game, figuring out how to get to that 90% chance favorite by the end, you're going to win a lot of games, probably around 90% of them. So that's the whole game plan. If you're John right now, you're not too worried about giving up a multiple score as long as it's not more than 2. So you have that opportunity.
Team Epping sitting shot rock and third shot. Mike McEwen second and fourth. Team McEwen looking at how they want to rearrange things here. As you said, at some point, it's likely that Team Epping will have a double because these blue rocks are going to be grouped if you're making a play off of them.
Yeah, it's difficult to see exactly. It looks like they might be playing a short run back on the left side, that blue into the red. I think if you're going to do that, you want to hit it a little bit on the center line side and maybe push that blue stone that you're hitting out to the side towards that corner guard. You can imagine if that blue is behind the corner guard, your shooter sticks around on the center line, and the other blue is angle frozen towards that blue that's going to be top 12, it's going to be difficult to make a double. So I think you want to hit this just slightly on the center line side, although with the sweeping, they might be going the other way.
Looks like they're going the other way, getting the shooter to roll behind the corner guard. It's got to hang on. It does. Nice throw. The Blues are still okay lined up. Hard to make a double off of those Blues.
Yeah, I guess, I was looking at the shot of playing it the other way, but that it looks like they may have just sort of gotten away with it. I think that blue one rolled maybe a bit further than they were hoping. I think they wanted to keep the angle directly onto that red, but it rolled right up onto the nose of the blue, so it's difficult to make the double. Of course, it'll be pretty easy to get one of the blues going. The one at the back will take out the red and roll out, but you'd have to hit this pretty thin with a lot of weight to really make the double, which is certainly something that Matt Cam is capable of. I wouldn't be surprised to see him make this double and get the Blues moving, but very difficult all the same.
Yeah, but then you're going to lose the shooter, and Mike McEwen can hit that red stone if it doesn't fly out already on this shot and set two. So I think it still worked out okay for Mike McEwen there, even though maybe that roll went a hair too far.
Absolutely, and this might not be good if that blue sticks around behind the corner. And as the dust settles, it looks like it's pretty well buried, maybe showing a third or a half. Possible.
Yeah, a little bit exposed, I think. But like you said, if you hit it a little bit thick, you're not going to get the blue stones out, and that's what happened. Pat Jansen was trying to sweep it to pull that rock out and hit it thinner, but now a really good opportunity for Mike McEwen to put up a crooked number, maybe even put up a 3 here.
Yeah, and of course the question, if you're John, is there a double? Right? We talked about, just if you give up a 2, that's fine, but you don't want to give up any more than that. So Mike's going to draw into the rings and sit 3 here. So your question is if you can find a double somewhere, and you can see a good amount of that blue that's just biting the 12 foot, but I'm not convinced you can see enough to make the blue double.
The double certainly looks very tough on those blue stones on the wide side. So just drawing to the open side here.
Yeah, and I think
if you're separated.
Absolutely. And if you're Mike, the most important thing is to make sure that this rock is deeper than the other 2 blues on the other side of the rings. If you left this a bit higher in the top 12, you might leave the opportunity for a crosshouse double, which looks like they might have done here. So now John has the opportunity to make a crosshouse double off that stone they just threw. Whereas if that was at least top 4 or T-line, there's really no double the other way because of that red guard that's in the way. So you might see John play this crosshouse double. It looks like he might be looking at possibly the short run back. No, they're looking at the crosshouse double now. So maybe a bit of a miscue there for Mike McEwen. But of course, John still needs to make this. This is John's first rock, right? We're not losing rocks like last end again?
Absolutely. It is John's first stone. And this crosshouse double, not very short, but if you can make it, you can make it really good and stay behind that corner guard. Then you might even take 2 out of play.
Yeah, even if you hit a little bit.
Because the blue-red run back, the shooter wouldn't stick around.
Probably right, although this not just a little bit wide, not quite getting the curl afterwards, so it just picks it out and rolls underneath, and yeah, the opportunity for Mike to make this one even better. That might have been John's one opportunity to get out of this end, so it's really looking good for a multiple score here if you're Mike McEwen, and a 3 is all looking in the eyes of John Epping right now.
So where is the perfect depth to put this? Is it all the way to the back of the 8, or do you want it on the tee line here?
I think what you'd like is preferably the same height as that blue stone that's just biting the 8-foot and just mirrored over to the other side of the rings. I think obviously if you're a little bit high, as we saw, John will have the crosshouse double. If you're a little bit low, it's possible John might play the run back on the red, because if he comes off of either of those two blue rocks, the red stone might roll over to the other side of the rings. You might be able to make a run double that way. So if you are dead even with that blue stone biting the 8-foot on the other side, there's really no doubles anywhere that I can see. So that's probably the one place you want to put it that's going to give you the best chance at 3.
Well, Lang and Buick working hard on this one, trying to make sure the depth is a bit better than the last one. Looks like Ryan Fry's asking for it to go to the back of the 8. Certainly no double anymore.
Yeah,
Even the hit and roll to be shot stone will be quite difficult if you're trying to roll behind the guard, right? That's going to be a very flat roll, so probably looking at the run back now.
Yeah, and that was the other thing I was thinking too. If you did put it where I was talking about, like that sort of top 4 height on the other side, there would be the opportunity for John to maybe play a crosshouse hit and roll. I think that's probably a pretty good spot. It's deep enough that this sort of run back double would be very thin off of one of the other stones. So it's probably in a pretty good spot. Maybe if you put it a foot deeper, it's perfect. But either way, a very difficult attempt coming up here by John. I would be surprised if he didn't get one of the blue rocks moving, but to get more than one is going to be extremely difficult.
I'm not surprised John Epping is playing this run back. Would you consider playing the freeze onto that stone that Mike McEwen just played? Hopefully getting a decent angle such that when Mike blasts at it, he has to lose the shooter, and maybe that's the way you give up 2 points.
Very good attempt there by John. Gets that second blue rock moving, but just not quite enough. You could think about playing the freeze there. The only issue with that is looking again back at the scoreboard. You give up a 3 and you're down 1. That's workable. You got to get 2. You get 2 points to win the game, something John has already done twice this game. So being down 1 isn't the end of the world. Being down 2, if you ever miss that freeze and you suddenly give up a 4, that's killer, because now you're looking at taking a 2 and having to steal the extra in order to win. So it might be something that you'd think about in maybe a slightly different score situation, but I think with the way it is right now, giving up a 3, you're not completely lost. Obviously, it's not what John wanted to do coming into this end, but you're still down 1 which is a position that's more or less winnable, but being down 2 is much, much tougher.
All right, so public service announcement for you, Matt. This is the final stone of the 7th end. Mike McEwen, chance to draw for 3. Pretty much the same path that he just took. Try to claim a 1-point lead going into the last end. He hasn't led all game. Was down by as much as 3 points. Sweepers have backed off of this, but it's probably fine. Just on its own. There it is, 3 points for Team McEwen, a crooked number. That's what they were looking for, and they're going to take a 1-point lead heading into the 8th end.
Imagine being able to stream every curling game from every sheet from any event, be it your Wednesday league game, bonspiel, or corporate event. Curling Stadium offers an all-inclusive streaming solution featuring high-quality cameras, ease of use, great reliability, and minimal installation. Offering your sponsors customizable ad space on your streamed curling games and being able to sell video packages to your corporate events for increased revenue. With Curling Stadium, you can stream to any device, be it your mobile phone, tablet, or computer. Push the feed to your desired platform, be it Facebook, YouTube, or any other social media. Curling Stadium is simply the way forward. Where it's commonplace in other sports to televise every game, we want to do the same. Curling is a global sport, and it's time it gets the coverage it needs. Make your curling club the next curling stadium.
We're back here for final end action. Here in the game between John Epping and Mike McEwen. I'm Matthew Hall, joined by Jason Chang, and we just saw a big score of 3 by Mike McEwen to take his first lead in the game. And thinking back to that last end, Jason, I think it really came down to that one shot by Matt Cam. They maybe took on a little bit of a risk to try and get that double to get both rocks out of the rings. It was very thin. He ended up hitting it a little bit thick and pushed that blue stone behind the corner guard, and I think that ended up being the 3rd point there.
Yeah, very classic situation now where you have the team with last stone being down by 1 in the 8th end. The situation of what would you rather be, down 1 with or up 1 without. Matt, what did the stats say on this situation?
Well, I mean, the stats are pretty clear in general. You want to be up 1 without. It's about a 60-40 split between up 1 without having the advantage versus down 1 with is about 40%. But it varies a lot from team to team. Me personally, I was always in the camp where I wanted to be up 1 without. I was always better in that sort of situation to defend that lead. Um, but I think there's a lot of teams out there that might be a bit more, actually be a little bit better being down 1 with. John might be one of those people actually, because John generally in his career has been pretty aggressive. He likes having rocks in play. He likes having the opportunity for a multiple score. So I don't know the exact numbers for John's teams and Mike's team, but in general, it's certainly possible that it could go either way for these guys. So usually you want to be up 1 without, but I think we're in for a good treat here to finish.
Yeah, so in general, maybe a bit of advantage for the general team being up 1 without, but each team needs to look at their own stats over history to determine what's the best situation for them. And if they are ever in a situation where they can control that scenario, play to their own advantage. I'm opposite to you, Matt. I think my stats have always shown that I'm better off 1 up without going into the last end. So
yeah, and we talked a little bit earlier in this game about how a team in the last end it's very likely that we'll see John taking on some very difficult shot for 2 rather than just an easy shot for 1 to go into the extra end without the hammer. And John is one of those guys that loves that big shot, having that hammer in his hand. We've seen it many times in his career where, he makes that long angle run back at the end of a game to win, or the end of the end to score multiple points. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of those guys that likes to be down 1 with, because he likes having that opportunity to make that big shot, and he does it very well. Whereas Mike usually is a bit more defensive. He's known as a very good hitter, of course, coming out of Manitoba. So having that opportunity to defend this position might be his opportunity. So it's one of those things where, both teams are probably pretty comfortable with the situation they're in, and we're going to see who executes their 8 shots better than the other guy here this end.
well, with McEwen trying to either steal or force John Epping, and John Epping trying to get 2, you've seen a lot of guards go up in this end. So be a pretty busy end with a lot of rocks in play.
Absolutely. Taking a quick look before we get too deep into this at some of the other games, Nancy Martin 7-1 winner over Brett Barber. So she improves her record to, I believe, 3-1. Yes.
Yep, she's at 3-1. She started off with a loss, but rolled off 3 straight wins.
Clancy Grandy with the 1-point lead 4-3 with the hammer in the 8th end against Silvana Tiranzoni. That's a team, I believe this is their third meeting already this year. I believe they played each other twice last weekend in an event in Quebec, and Tiranzoni came out with the win both times. So very good chance for Clancy to come up with a little bit of a revenge win there against them. And the other men's game is, I believe, in the 7th end still, 6-3 for Schwaller.
Yannick Schwaller 1-1. They'd like to improve their record to 2-1. Play against Kyler Kleibrink 1-2. So for Team Kleibrink, they really need to get a win here to keep their playoff hopes alive. Don't want to drop to a third. Back of the 8-foot. Now going to put another one in, I think. Go top of the 8, top of the 4, maybe?
Yeah, I think you want to sort of get another rock in there. That rock back 4 isn't really helping you too much. That's just going to be an opportunity for John to come down and make a freeze. So get a second rock in here, top 4. Really cut down the scoring area for John before you sort of maybe run up and start peeling some guards. Get yourself in a good opportunity and force John to make some tough shots. Pretty good spot there, just stopping top of the button. And as I actually go over and check, it is a final between Yannick Schwaller and Kyler Kleibrink. Schwaller taking 4 in the last 10, so it's a 10-3 win for them to improve their record to 2-1.
Team Epping now, not sure if they were trying to go straight back here or not, but they do get the guard up away. They clip another guard on the way by, which isn't a bad thing because they also want to open up a draw path too. And that right-hand side, that out-turn draw if you're a righty wasn't really there. Now it probably is again, although Team McEwen's got a stone in a pretty good spot, top of the button. They're going to guard the situation, Matt.
Yeah, and you see this a lot. You might think it's sort of counterintuitive to be walking up and peeling guards when you have the hammer and you need to. But you see this a lot at this level where as long as they can keep at least one guard, preferably 2 in some good spots, that's all these guys really need to score their 2 points. So getting rid of those 2 rocks and opening up this stone on the button, which is really going to be the pain for John Epping throughout the rest of the end, gives him the opportunity to get in there, play some taps, move stuff around, and if he can ever just get one rock behind one of these guards, that's going to be his opportunity for 2. So you're probably once again going to see Matt Cam try to play this run back. Preferably if you could ever get all 3 blues moving, at least out of the 4-foot, that's going to give John the opportunity to play a draw either around the corner guard or around the center guard on Matt's last and really set up his 2 very nicely.
You can see the scoreboard at the back. Team Epping, they had a fast start to this game, jumped out to 4-1 lead. Team McEwen battling their way back in the second half. Now with a 1-point lead, Matt runs it back, straight back. The blue stone that he ran back has stayed in the button area behind now the center guard. Did get the other 2 out of the way, but still a pretty good position for Mike McEwen with 1 in the rings guarded.
Yeah, I think maybe just a 1/4 inch or so off from perfect. If he hits that a little bit higher, possibly those other 2 blues don't go out as quickly, but at least he would have gotten this other blue rolling out of the 4-foot. Instead, he leaves it on the button pretty much buried. Now, one of the good things is he did leave his red rock just short of the rings there. So that's always going to be an opportunity for John to play a short run back, get some blues moving, and possibly get his 2 that way. Although I think if you're Mike, you maybe start thinking about just if you can ever freeze another blue stone down onto his own, or maybe even some separation, leave it top 8 to put something in the way of both the draw for John and the run back. If you can maybe put it maybe full 8 touching the center line, kind of gets in both the way of both of those shots. So I think you'll see them try to play that draw, put it in a good spot. If you ever slip a little bit deep and you freeze your own rock, that works too. It's just one more thing that John has to worry about.
Ryan Fry being asked to put another rock into the rings in front of their own blue stone. That's shot stone right now. That would be the winning stone if things ended up this way. Curls it into the top 12. Maybe overcurled a little bit on them.
Yeah, just slightly. I think that's a good spot if it's maybe maybe 2 feet deeper, fully in the 8 foot, because it would kind of choke off the run back and be a little bit more difficult to make this draw. But I think with where it ended up just full 12, now John has enough room where he can sort of follow them down, make it past that rock in the 12 foot. And we talked about how much curl there is late. So he should be able to get to the inside of that blue stone on the button, possibly even tap it back to a position where he might be shot stone, which is what you want to be. If you can be shot with that last rock in your hand, that's all John can hope for. So we'll see. They don't seem to hate it early on. They're staying very close.
They don't need to move it far to be shot stone. Still needs to come over. They've frozen on top of it. Just off nose right now, but a good spot for them, though.
Absolutely. I think I wasn't sure if whether the call was to move it or to freeze. I think the freeze is probably the better call. They have a great angle on that stone. Now, of course, if you imagine if Mike didn't throw and John had his last rock coming, he could just follow Matt down the exact same path he just did, play that little double tap and score 2 that way. So now Mike has something to sort of deal with. How do you put a rock in a situation where John won't be able to come down and tap? And if you look, he also has that. If you look at that wide guard now on the left hand side from the overhead, he always has the opportunity to run that back in as well. So possibly the chance to get 2 points in 2 different ways. So Mike has to be very careful about where he places this to try and avoid leaving John an easy shot to win.
What do you think they've decided to do here? Are they just trying to block that hole right now? Or do they want to come right to the red stone?
I think you'd love to come right to the red stone, as long as it's in a position where John can't get rid of it. So if you lock one on that red stone in the same line as they are frozen right now, it's going to be very difficult for John to play a hit and get the blue one moving far enough to score 2. I think if you maybe just end up on the nose or slightly to the inside, that's probably okay. So I don't think he wants to move that situation at all. He's probably just looking at playing the freeze, or even if you just went full top 8, getting a rock in John's way where he isn't able to come down and make the tap, although this is really over curling.
So now probably just trying to leave it as a guard and block that hole if they can.
Absolutely. See if it spins back. It
Spins
does.
a little bit. Might still be a small port there.
Right, but if there's not a port, John might be able to play a double and maybe wiggle his shooter through if he hits them both really thin.
Squirt it through and make contact with the red stone. That is an option.
I'm not convinced there's a hole there. There might be. It's difficult to tell, but I think if you hit that rock Mike just threw as thin as you possibly can, so that you hit that second blue stone behind the guard thin, your rock might squirt through, roll towards that situation on the button. You ever hit it perfect, it could come back and move that stuff as well and end up leaving you sitting 2. Of course, that would be a big ask. But I think even if you just make that double and you can get your shooter to wiggle through in some way, even if you don't disturb that positioning on the button, you leave yourself with some opportunities to score 2. There's still that wide guard on the left-hand side. You may be able to run that one in. You might have an opportunity with that tight guard near the center line to run that in some way, get rid of the blue to score 2. So I think as long as you don't lose your shooter completely and it rolls right through the rings, you leave yourself with a couple different chances to score 2. And that's really what you want if you're John. If you have multiple different ways, sort of both sides of the sheet to score your 2, Mike can't block both of them. So it would put him in a very uncomfortable situation trying to decide which shot John has the better opportunity of making and trying to guard that shot, but you'll always leave something for him. And I think you're going to see a lengthy discussion here by John trying to figure out exactly what you're going to do. And I wouldn't be surprised if he makes a good shot to see a really long discussion by Mike afterwards. So I think we're in this for the long haul here.
Teams are able to call a timeout if they have a coach. We've seen that in an earlier draw, and some teams did bring their coach along, particularly the international teams. Otherwise, no need to call the timeout. They can just take as much time as they need within reason. There aren't any time clocks in play, but all right, the broom goes down. So you think this is the thin blue onto blue and try to squirt in? Or is it just a straight double and stay right there?
I think basically you're trying to get as close to that center guard as you can without hitting it, obviously. And if you can do that, you should see your shooter wiggle through the hole a little bit. Looks very close.
Blue squirts in, touches it, moves it back. Red is shot stone.
I'm
surprised it didn't sweep that blue stone a little bit further. I'm not sure who's second shot. It might be red as well. It's very close for second shot.
Yeah, one of the problems, though, if you're Mike, is with those red rocks are basically just frozen nose to nose. And as we saw with Matt Cam's shot last end, can be very difficult to get both of those rocks out of the rings. One of the problems, especially with how close they are, is with what's known as the drag effect. So if you imagine, you look at the angle of those red stones right now, they're angled in such a way that they shouldn't hit that blue stone. But with the roughness of the striking bands of the stones, if you hit that red rock on the left side as we look at the overhead, the second red rock will actually drag to the right. Now, whether it'll drag enough to straight jam onto that blue one back 4, I don't know. But it looks like he's going to take on the opportunity to try and make this thin double and get both red rocks moving.
Yeah, it's really important for curlers, even at the rec level, to understand drag. And when the rocks are so close like that, that second rock almost acts like it's part of the first rock. And that's why it gets pulled into the same direction as where that first rock is hit. Absolutely. And we're going to see whether there is enough drag here to jam or whether Mike can squeeze this by. It probably will clip the back blue is my guess. The question is, does it spill off?
I agree. I think if you hit like a third of a stone here, if you're Mike, that red rock will definitely make contact with the blue. I would be surprised if it dragged enough to jam and stick around, but they're moving the broom out, so I'm not entirely sure what the what kind of weight he's throwing. Is he trying to make maybe just a nose hit? I don't know. I don't think
nose hit would be the other option. Play it quiet, sit right on the nose, try to cut down the scoring area and make John maybe play a tap on the red guard. We're going to see. Looks to be a quieter weight shot, so I think they might be going for nose hit now. They do make the hit, but it didn't quite get to nose.
Yeah, and I think that moved that red in, so now it is shot. So it's going to be a straight draw to the forefoot for the win for John Epping. So I think if you looked at this position 3 or 4 shots ago, you wouldn't think he would have just a straight shot for the win, but As it turns out, that great shot by him in the first one sort of set things up perfectly, and now it's just a draw to the forefoot.
They do have that red guard to contend with. It's not in the way of just trying to get into the four, but it does cut down the real estate a little bit.
Right, and it does push you out into a spot that, just off the top of my head, I don't know if they've thrown a draw out this wide on this side of the sheet, so maybe some question marks there. But I mean, if the ice surface is pretty good across the sheet, you'd expect him to be fairly close here.
Here we go. Final stone, Team Epping down by one, sitting one. They've got the tie. This is a draw to the four for the win over Team McEwen. Now, sweeper's hard on it. It's already over curled. There's not enough weight. It's going to be just a single, and we're going to have bonus curling. 6-6 tie through 8. Join us in a few minutes for the extra end.
Imagine a place with endless possibilities. Imagine a place where people come together to build families, businesses, and communities. Imagine a place where small town values and progressive qualities are in perfect harmony. Imagine a place rich with so much vitality. Imagine your future in Martensville.
Imagine being able to stream every curling game from every sheet from any event, be it your Wednesday league game, bonspiel, or corporate event. Curling Stadium offers an all-inclusive streaming solution featuring high-quality cameras, ease of use, great reliability, and minimal installation. Offering your sponsors customizable ad space on your streamed curling games and being able to sell video packages to your corporate events for increased revenue. With Curling Stadium, you can stream to any device, be it your mobile phone, tablet, or computer. Push the feed to your desired platform, be it Facebook, YouTube, or any other social media. Curling Stadium is simply the way forward. Where it's commonplace in other sports to televise every game, we want to do the same. Curling is a global sport, and it's time it gets the coverage it needs. Make your curling club the next Curling Stadium.
SaskTel Be Kind Online wants to stop cyberbullying. Want in on the action? You can get a grant to help. We award up to $1,000 for youth initiatives that help spread kindness and prevent bullying. It's easy. SaskTel has already given away tens of thousands of dollars. There have been lots of great ideas, including kids giving cookies to others, a group set up to welcome newcomers to their school, random acts of kindness, and so much more. The ideas and opportunities are endless. What great idea do you have to help stop bullying? SaskTel can help. Go to BeKindOnline.com and apply for a grant today. Together, we can make a difference.
We are back here in Martensville for the ninth end, the extra end here in this battle between two veterans of the game, Mike McEwen, John Epping. John Epping had a chance for the win, Matt, in the last end, had to draw the four, but pushed out a little bit wide, and that rock never had the weight or the line. And Team McEwen battled their way back from a 4-1 deficit to get to the extra end. Didn't think we were going to go to extras halfway through this match, but Matt, here we are, Mike McEwen, their team battling back.
Yeah, and if I thought we were going to extras, I maybe wouldn't have bet on McEwen having hammer either. But yeah, we find ourselves in this situation. As I said, I think, John maybe just forced out into a spot they didn't really know. I mean, you'd expect them to be a lot closer with that shot. Halfway through, like halfway down the sheet, I thought maybe they were playing the tap the whole way because it had already curled so much. But unfortunately, just not able to make it, and now find themselves sort of losing control of this game here in the extra end. They're going to have to come up with a steal, and it's they're happy to see that first shot by Brent Lang not being able to make that tick, so they'll get the second opportunity to maybe throw up a guard or put a good rock in a good spot in the rings here.
The tick shot has become now a staple in all the leagues' toolkits. You see them practicing that shot a lot. The World Curling Federation tested out the no tick rule at the last World Championships, men's and women's, where if the rock landed on the center line, a guard landed on the center line, you could not tick it. Do you think the curling rules will go that direction and eliminate the ticks from the leads of the game?
Um, well, if you ask for me, my personal opinion would be I hope it doesn't. I not really a fan of taking tools away from players, especially in the past years. They've worked so hard to get that skill to uh, be as good as it is. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of just straight up taking that ability away from the teams. Will it go that way is a bit of another question. I think there's a good chance it might. And I think from what we saw at the Worlds last year, we saw a lot of steals to win games. One specifically off the top of my head, it felt like watching, especially at the women's worlds, Carrie Anderson dropped a couple games late to, I believe Korea was one of them. There was another game who I can't remember who they were playing at the time, but they gave up steals either in the extra or the 10th end to lose some games, and definitely the no tick rule uh, was a part of that. And I think maybe they just weren't quite used to the strategies that changes and being able to execute that. But will it happen? I'm not entirely sure, but it'll be interesting. And I think it definitely adds a wrinkle to the game. That maybe not isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely makes it more interesting in these extra ends and late games when a team is looking for a steal.
Well, another tick shot was attempted by Brent Lang. This one drifts right by, so two guards up in front for Team Epping. That's what they'd like to see. Maybe the only problem with it were they're not stacked up right on top of each other. There's a bit of a stagger, I think, that could lead to a double peel later this end. But you're right. The curling bodies will look at the statistics, look at the rules, see how they can make the game more exciting. I think that's part of the motivation of trying no tick, is to see if that makes the game more exciting for the fans with more rocks in play potentially in that last end. Give teams who are down maybe a little bit extra chance to come back, create a little bit more drama, or even if the stats don't change the number of comebacks, at least make the ends a little bit more interesting going into the last few stones rather than just an open draw to the 8 foot for the win. That's often what you see when teams can make two ticks. The skipper of the hammer team just has to hit the 8 foot for their last rock.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, sport is an entertainment industry, and if it makes it more excitable for the fans, then it's probably what they're going to go with. And I think you'll just see the players adapt to whatever rules come into place. They'll figure it out. They'll get better at it. And then probably in another 4 or 5 years, we'll be talking about how to change the game even more, because they've gotten too good at it, or it's become less excitable kind of thing. But looking at this situation here in this end, John Buke not able to come up with the double peel. I was a little bit surprised to see them take the second chance at the tick. Once it was missed, John Epping drew one around. And the reason I was surprised to see them second chance, because those guards were fairly close. So I thought it might be a bit more of a straightforward double, but John Buke not able to come up with it. So a second opportunity now for Team Epping to put a rock in a really good spot. And if they make this freeze, not quite down to it, but in a pretty good position, it's going to be Mike's going to have some work here. Probably have to run a garden at some point to move those rocks off the button and give himself an opportunity. Or can he see enough of it to maybe just play the straight hit right now, I think is what they're talking about.
Yeah, and if they happen to be a bit tight and kill the guard, that's okay too, right? You gotta hit something here. If you're gonna play the rocks in the house, you can't miss it wide.
Absolutely. I don't mind seeing them take a crack at it. If you get the guard, you get the guard. As long as you make contact. Uh-oh. not
Well,
that.
that's not a pro side miss. That's the type of miss that I would make, Matt, is the wide side.
Yeah, and that's always something that, I mean, look, again, it's for many of these guys, it's their first event of the season. I think it's the second one for Team Epping. So there's still going to be a little bit of rust, and these aren't the mistakes that we'll expect to see maybe in a couple months or once they get to their provincials, but it'll happen from time to time early in the season. I think, yeah, maybe that's just a little bit of a mental lapse. That's something that you have to sort of take that extra second in the hack, take the extra breath. You're not on time clocks here, there's no rush, and really make sure that you're sort of, you want to throw that rock so that you're on the guard out of your hand. That out of your hand, you're already peeling the guard. And if your sweepers can pull it back enough to get it off and you make the hit on the back one, that's great. But you have to get something moving. Going right by there, as you see, just gives John the opportunity. He makes another excellent guard there, and Mike is in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, he's got him run it back now. Try to get as many rocks moving as he can because these are almost lined up vertical. And you're right, John's team, they have played an event the past week, Curling Stadium. They were in Alberta in Leduc. Team Epping went 2-2 in that event. Didn't make the playoffs, but a good chance to get their feet under them and with this new lineup.
And another missed run back there by Team McEwen. And I mean, there's not really a better position you could imagine being in this end. I think you're just going to see John continue to throw up this high guard until Mike makes a run back. And if he doesn't make a run back, I don't know how he scores at the moment. He might be able to run that angle, that blue corner guard in, but obviously that would be very difficult. I think if you're John, you're making him throw that, you're a happy camper.
Yeah, for Team Epping, you're pretty much covering the pin right now with the rock right in front of it. So that corner angle run back doesn't look great. And there, that rock isn't lined up very well either with the angle. Another guard goes up. A little bit more of a stagger now.
It is a little bit. I think, yeah, I don't think they minded maybe a little bit of a stagger, but that rock is maybe 2-3 feet deeper than they would have liked. So there is the opportunity here. This double peel is a little bit easier now. A great shot by Ryan Fry. That's about all you could really hope for. He got most of the got all the rocks moving. Did leave one biting the top of the button, but at least it's not frozen to another stone right now. So even if John makes the perfect guard, there's no like come around tap or something like that. Now the straight run back is definitely makeable for the win. So Mike should always have something to throw with his last stone at this point. It's just up to John to make it as tough as possible.
Yeah, really good shot, as you mentioned, by Ryan Fry. He's always had great hitting ability. I remember back when he was playing with Brad Jacobs and when they went on that run at the Olympic trials, the pre-trials, I believe, then the Olympic trials, and then the Olympics. And they had a lot of success, I think, because Ryan was playing so well, especially with his upweight hits.
Absolutely. I remember watching Brad Jacobs at that first World Championships in 2011 after, or sorry, 2013 in Victoria after he beat Jeff Stoughton in the Brier final. And Ryan Fry really was sort of the MVP of that event. And, you know, hasn't necessarily been able to find his way back to the top of the podium, but always sort of a fierce competitor, always has had that skill set, and is definitely sort of one of those guys that when he's hot, it's not somebody you want to be playing against, that's for sure. That guard may be coming up a little bit high. There may be a hole near that center line. And as I look at it, there's a bunch of options here for Mike. There's the hole near the center line. If it came to it, he might be able to make an in-off through the hole between the two blue guards. He can definitely, he'll have a run back on those blue guards, but I think you want to try and get through this hole and at least get that rock off of the button. If you can get it off of the button, it's going to be tough for John to put it in a spot that doesn't give you at least some sort of shot to win the game.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the great run back by Ryan Fries really opened up the options for Mike McEwen. And I definitely think you play through the hole here. Even if you catch one of the guards, if you miss, you're opening it up and you're going to force John Epping to put up another guard. And you always have a run back or that in-off double, as you mentioned.
I think if you're going to miss this shot, you'd prefer to move the red guard. Although if you move the blue guard, that gives you the more space for possibly that in off the red side 8. But I think if you move that red guard, you force John to throw the same shot, and then you're probably always going to have a run back or something for the win at the very least.
Well, Team McEwen having another look at it after Mike had already gone all the way down.
I'm getting confirmation now as they talk this shot through that Clancy Grandy had to make a draw to the full forefoot to beat Tirinzoni, and she was successful in doing that. So Clancy comes away with the 5-3 victory over previously unbeaten on the season team Tirinzoni. I believe that's their first loss. I think they went 6-0 last weekend. So that's their third match against Clancy, and she comes out with the win this time.
Yeah, puts Clancy in a great spot to make the playoffs now at 3-0. So Mike switching the rock he's throwing. That's interesting. So maybe the two rocks might be just a little bit different, preferring one over the other for this shot.
You might prefer one with a little bit less curl here because you're trying to navigate through a port, a little bit less to work with while calling the line. He's switching them again. Oh no, sorry. First shot here for Mike McEwen in the extra end.
Trying to get through this narrow port. Make a play on the Epping shot stone. The sweeper's now going back and forth with the sweeper trying to control the curl. They're through. Nice shot right on the nose. Team McEwen now with the winning point on the top of the forefoot. I think John's going to have to just follow it in, I think. Now, if they follow it in and nose, I don't think Team McEwen can follow it in again and play the nose because the red Epping stone on that left side of your screen as we see it would outcount a McEwen stone if it goes nose and nose again.
I think you're right, but I think given the situation, even if you could do that, I would be surprised to see Mike play it. It's a very tough port to do once, let alone twice. Worst case scenario here, I think John would maybe just be biting the forefoot, so it'd probably be an open draw to the forefoot to win the game with the out turn.
The out turn draw, the counterclockwise turn for Mike McEwen. Well, first, John Epping, he needs to negotiate this port as well. Pat Jansen, few licks, trying to hold the line. That's what they're doing. Looks like it's pretty good through the port. They make the nose hit as well.
Back-to-back outstanding shots there by the skips, and it'll just be an out turn draw to the forefoot for Mike McEwen. Well, no, he's played a number of draws. Usually, he's last couple ends he's been playing some taps, so probably has his back 8 weight in his pocket. But just take a couple feet off that and let your sweepers work it into the forefoot for you.
Yeah, the only tricky thing is they haven't played anything on this side of the sheet for a while, so you wonder whether things have changed, and sometimes ice conditions have changed if the neighboring sheet beside you has also come off.
Yes, I believe in the last end, though, if I'm remembering correctly, when John had those two rocks frozen in the forefoot, side of the forefoot, Mike, I believe, played this exact same line trying to freeze down onto them. Now, I
That
think he
freeze,
was
yeah, this is a very similar line to that. So
yeah, he
they'll
was
have
a
a pretty
little
good
light on
idea.
that, so he'll probably try and throw a foot or two extra, but should be something that he has a lot of information to work with.
Here we go. Mike McEwen, their teams clawed their way back to a 6-6 tie with hammer extra ends, and he's got a chance to hit the forefoot for the win against Team John Epping. Sweepers pick up on this right away. Now they're looking a little bit happier, I think.
It's really curling.
On and off. They've got to make sure they get it by the Epping stone at the top of the rings. They do. It slides right onto the top of the button. A great draw by Mike McEwen. Clutch at the end. They hung with the scoreboard after being down 4-1. And Mike McEwen, they improved their record to 3-1, drops John Epping to 1-2. Matt, really a tale of two halves in this game.
Absolutely. Yeah, falling behind early was the McEwen squad, and we talked about, they just need to stick with it, hopefully get a couple misses out of John. I think they did in the last half of the game, and were able to come away with the win.
Yeah, they certainly took the type of advice that you were giving, being down 4-1 halfway through the game, and then one really clutch steal, and then that 3 in the 7th end to go up for the first time. Team McEwen taking down John Epping here today. Both teams with some matches left. Team McEwen one more against Kyler Clybrink. John Epping, they've got 2 left against Dallin Myers and Colton Flash. Well, that does bring us to the end of the coverage of draw number 8 here in Martensville. We have 2 more draws tonight, 5 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. Saskatchewan time. If you're out in the Eastern time zone, add 2 hours to that. Well, on behalf of Matt Hall and the entire Curling Stadium crew, my name is Jason Chang. Join us again later tonight as we bring you more action from Martensville.
Imagine being able to stream every curling game from every sheet from any event, be it your Wednesday league game, bonspiel, or corporate event. Curling Stadium offers an all-inclusive streaming solution featuring high-quality cameras, ease of use, great reliability, and minimal installation. Offering your sponsors customizable ad space on your streamed curling games and being able to sell video packages to your corporate events for increased revenue. With Curling Stadium, you can stream to any device, be it your mobile phone, tablet, or computer. Push the feed to your desired platform, be it Facebook, YouTube, or any other social media. Curling Stadium is simply the way forward. Where it's commonplace in other sports to televise every game, we want to do the same. Curling is a global sport, and it's time it gets the coverage it needs. Make your curling club the next Curling Stadium.
Saskatchewan, you know SaskTel, because we're everywhere. Because being everywhere keeps us connected to you. You are what matters most. With SaskTel sponsorships, we get to be a part of your community. From the dance competitions, to the rodeos, to helping discover and embrace technology across the province, we're here with you, and we're here for you. It's easy to get started. All you need to do is apply. Every year, SaskTel contributes nearly $3 million to approximately 1,000 nonprofits, charities, associations, and events in more than 200 communities across Saskatchewan. So keep dancing, keep laughing, keep discovering, and we'll be there to help, to lend a hand, and join in the fun. SaskTel cares. Always has, always will, because we are dedicated to our home. To apply for sponsorship, visit SaskTel.com/sponsorships.